The early light of morning touched the hills of Thebes with a pale gold glow. Mist drifted gently over the fields, soft as a silken veil, and birds began their slow chorus, their notes weaving into the cool silence. Within the stillness, a story had already been set in motion, one that belonged to a child destined to carry both burden and wonder. Alcmene, a woman of quiet grace, stood at the threshold of her home. She felt the warmth of the sun touch her face and breathed in the fragrance of fresh earth after the night's dew. Her thoughts lingered on her child, the boy she cradled with equal pride and caution. His name was Heracles, though in later times many would call him Hercules. When she looked upon him, she saw more than the softness of an infant. His small hands, though tender, seemed already filled with restless power. His breath was calm, yet his eyes carried a flicker, as though some deeper flame stirred behind them. Alcmene often wondered if the gods had marked her son for paths beyond mortal measure. The people of Thebes whispered quietly about him. They said Zeus himself had visited Alcmene, wearing the likeness of her husband, Amphitryon. From that divine union, this child had been born. Though such tales swirled softly through the city streets, Alcmene kept her silence. She knew the gods were not beings to boast of, nor powers to invite lightly into mortal life. Still, in her heart she sensed the truth hidden in the rumors. One night, when Heracles was still lying in his cradle, the house became filled with a strange stillness. The air grew heavy, as though the stars themselves had paused to listen. Alcmene felt unease rising in her chest, and Amphitryon reached for his sword though no sound stirred. The cradle, carved from cedar wood, creaked gently as the child moved. Then came the hiss, soft at first, almost like the sound of wind in tall grass. But it grew clearer, sharper, and from the shadows 2 serpents slid across the floor. Their scales shone in the dim torchlight, pale green and black, their tongues flickering like whispers of flame. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, as though guided by more than instinct. Alcmene gasped, her voice caught in her throat. Amphitryon stepped forward, but before his hand could grasp the hilt of his blade, the cradle shifted. Heracles, still no more than an infant, reached with his tiny hands. His movements were unhurried, almost curious, as though he greeted some strange plaything. With a strength no child should possess, he caught the serpents as they drew near, one in each hand. Their bodies writhed and coiled, their jaws opened wide, but the infant's grip tightened. Alcmene covered her mouth, torn between fear and awe as her son pressed the creatures down. Slowly, with calm persistence, he subdued them until the hissing ceased, and the serpents lay still beneath his touch. Silence filled the chamber once more. The torchlight flickered, shadows leaning against the walls. Amphitryon stood frozen, his sword half drawn, his eyes fixed on the child who held death in his hands yet breathed with the peace of sleep. Alcmene rushed forward and gathered her son close, her arms trembling. She pressed her cheek to his dark curls and felt the steady rhythm of his heart. He did not cry. He did not fear. Only a quiet murmur left his lips, as if he dreamed of distant skies. The people of Thebes would soon hear of this night. Some would call it a blessing, proof that the boy carried divine favor. Others would whisper of Hera's jealousy, for they knew the queen of the heavens despised the children of Zeus born to mortal women. But for Alcmene, it was only the beginning of a mystery she could not yet unravel. Morning followed. The fields beyond the city stretched green and endless, touched with wildflowers. Alcmene walked among them with her child in her arms, feeling the coolness of dew against her feet. She looked to the sky wide and open and thought of the unseen powers that moved above. Her heart carried both pride and a gentle ache, for she knew the life of her son would never be simple. Heracles stirred, his small fingers curling as though reaching toward the light. Alcmene kissed his brow and whispered softly, "You will walk a path I cannot follow, my son. May the strength that lies within you bring not only power but kindness. May it carry you toward the light, not away from it." Years began to pass, each season shaping the boy. His childhood unfolded like a river, slow and steady, yet with currents hidden deep beneath the surface. He grew taller than other children, his limbs strong even in play. When he laughed, the sound filled the courtyard like a song carried on clear air. Yet there were times his eyes grew distant, as though he heard whispers carried only to him. Amphitryon taught him the ways of men, how to guide horses, how to lift a spear, how to honor the hearth in the city. Yet even Amphitryon felt a quiet distance, knowing the child bore a father greater than himself. At times, when Heracles lifted a stone heavier than any grown man could move, Amphitryon would watch with pride shadowed by wonder. The boy did not boast of his strength. Instead, he seemed to carry it lightly, as though unaware of the gift. But Alcmene saw the signs. She knew the gods were shaping him slowly, carefully, with each breath and step. She often wondered whether strength was meant to protect or to test. One evening, as twilight spread soft lavender across the horizon, Heracles sat beside his mother outside their home. He watched the first stars pierce the darkening sky. "Mother," he said quietly, "why do I feel as though the world waits for me?" Alcmene brushed her hand through his hair and smiled gently. "Perhaps it does, my son, but the world also carries you within it. Do not fear its weight. Let it guide you." Heracles leaned against her shoulder, listening to the faint sounds of crickets in the grass. The night was calm, the air cool, and the scent of olive trees drifted nearby. At that moment, he was only a boy with questions, unaware of the storms that would one day rise. The sky stretched vast above them, the constellations slowly weaving their eternal patterns. Somewhere far beyond sight, Hera's gaze lingered, sharp and unyielding. Yet in Thebes, the night folded gently around mother and son. Alcmene closed her eyes and felt the warmth of his presence beside her. She did not know how long peace would last, but she cherished the stillness while it remained. For even within silence, destiny stirred, waiting for the child who had once held serpents in his tiny hands. And as the stars brightened, Heracles whispered to himself, though his mother did not hear, "One day, I will know why I am strong." The night answered only with the steady song of crickets, carrying the boy's words into the quiet air, where they lingered like an unspoken promise. The morning sun drifted slowly across the sky of Thebes, its light gentle and warm, as though the heavens wished not to wake the city too quickly. From the hills, the sound of sheep bells carried softly, mingling with the distant hum of voices as farmers began their day. In the courtyard of a simple home, a boy stretched his arms toward the light. His hair caught the glow, dark and thick, and his shoulders already seemed broader than they should be for his age. Heracles rose with energy that felt endless. He drank deeply from the clay jar of water, cool against his lips, then ran barefoot across the courtyard stones. The world seemed to bend toward him, as though welcoming his steps. Yet when he turned, he saw his mother watching from the doorway. Alcmene's eyes were gentle, but within them lay a quiet concern. She had watched this boy since the cradle, watched how he held serpents in his tiny hands without fear. Now she saw how each day stretched him taller, stronger, faster than any child around him. She knew the truth whispered by the people of Thebes, that Zeus had marked this son of hers. And with that blessing came danger. Heracles carried no such thoughts as he lifted a wooden bucket filled with water from the well. To him, the weight felt light. He set it beside the door and smiled at his mother. "See? Easy." She returned his smile, though it carried the softness of warning. "Strength is not always meant to be shown, my son. Sometimes it is better to hide it, to let others believe you are the same as they are." Heracles tilted his head, puzzled. "Why should I hide what the god have given me?" Alcmene touched his cheek, her hand warm. "Because not all will see it as a gift. Some will see danger, and others will see envy. Remember this." The boy nodded, though her words lingered in him like seeds pressed into soil. Later that day, Amphitryon returned from the fields. His figure was tall, his beard flecked with gray, his hands rough from labor and battle alike. He called his son forward and placed a long wooden staff into his hands. The grain of the wood was smooth, worn from use, yet heavy enough to test the boy's balance. "Hold it firmly," Amphitryon instructed. "Not too tight, not too loose. Feel the weight as though it is part of your arm." Heracles obeyed, his grip steady. The staff seemed almost alive in his hands, humming faintly as he swung it through the air. Amphitryon showed him how to stand, how to move, how to strike. Dust lifted from the ground as the boy's feet shifted, his steps firm yet light. Again and again, Heracles swung the staff. At first clumsy, then more graceful, his body remembering what his mind could not yet teach. When he struck the earth, the staff sank deeper than his father expected, leaving marks in the soil like wounds. Amphitryon studied him quietly. Pride swelled in his chest, but alongside it came unease, for he saw more than a boy before him. He saw a force still hidden, like thunder behind the clouds. Enough, Amphitryon said at last. He rested a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the strength beneath the skin. You must learn more than power. You must learn restraint. A wild horse without reins runs into ruin. A man without control does the same. Hercules lowered the staff, breathing slowly. His brow furrowed. And if my hands hurt when I do not wish them to? Amphitryon looked into his eyes. Then your heart must teach your hands. Strength is not what makes a man good or evil. It is the heart that guides him. The words sank deep, though they did not fully bloom in Hercules' young mind. Still, he carried them, as one carries a hidden stone in the pocket. Seasons turned, and the boy grew. His limbs lengthened, his chest broadened, his laughter carried across the fields like a clear bell. Yet his strength could not be hidden. He lifted stones heavier than grown men could move. He carried water jars 2 at a time while others struggled with one. He ran swifter than hounds and climbed trees faster than the wind could follow. Children played with him, but whispered among themselves. Some admired, others feared. And Heracles began to feel the distance, like a wall rising slowly between him and the world. One evening, he sat with his mother beneath the olive trees. The air smelled of earth cooling after the day's heat, and crickets began their song in the tall grass. Fireflies floated softly, their glow like tiny stars fallen to the ground. "Mother," Heracles said, his voice low, "why do I feel as though unseen eyes watch me, even when I am alone?" Alcmene's hand brushed through his hair. "Perhaps because they do, my son. The gods often keep watch over those they have touched." Heracles looked up at the stars, countless and silent. "Do they watch with kindness?" She hesitated. The wind moved through the trees, rustling leaves like whispers. "Some may, others may not. But it matters less how they watch and more how you walk beneath their gaze." Heracles leaned into her shoulder. The night air was cool, and the soft hum of insects wrapped around them like a song. Yet in his chest, his heart beat with a weight he could not name. The next day brought a trial. While tending cattle with others, a cry rose suddenly across the fields. A bull had broken free from its tether. Its hide glistened with sweat, its eyes shone wild, and its hooves tore the earth in fury. Men scattered, calling for help, but Heracles did not think. He ran forward, the ground thundering beneath the beast's charge. Dust filled the air, sharp with the scent of churned soil. The bull lowered its head, horns gleaming. Heracles grasped them with both hands. The world seemed to shudder. The bull's power surged through him, raw and wild. His feet sank into the earth, his muscles tightened, but he did not release. Slowly, breath by breath, he forced the animal back. The bull bellowed, its cry echoing across the valley, but Heracles held fast, steady as stone. At last the beast weakened, trembling beneath his grip. Gently, carefully, the boy guided it back to its tether. He placed a hand upon its flank, stroking its hide until the trembling ceased. The farmers who watched stood in silence. Some whispered blessings, others shook their heads in fear. A boy of such strength was not of ordinary blood. They knew the old stories of Zeus, and they knew the jealousy of Hera. To them, Heracles was both hope and danger, gift and curse. Heracles felt none of their whispers. He only felt the bull's breath beneath his palm, hot and heavy. He spoke softly, words only the animal could hear. "You are wild, but you are not alone. I am the same." That night, as stars spread silver across the heavens, he lay awake. The crickets sang, the olive trees swayed, and the city slept. But within him stirred the quiet river of questions. He pressed his hand against his chest and whispered to himself, "If the world waits for me, then I must learn why." The night gave no answer. Only the steady hum of life carried his words into the darkness, where the unseen gods listened in silence. The stars faded slowly into the pale wash of morning. Thebes stirred awake, its rooftops touched by soft light, and the air carried the fragrance of bread baking in clay ovens. From the courtyard of his home, Heracles lifted his gaze to the sky, where the last traces of night lingered like a fading dream. The question from the night before remained within him. Why does the world wait for me? His mother's words returned, gentle but uncertain. Some gods may watch with kindness, others may not. He turned the thought over as one turned a smooth stone in the hand, feeling its weight but never finding its full meaning. The boy walked to the edge of the olive grove, where the trees stretched in orderly rows, their trunks twisted with age, silver leaves shimmering in the dawn breeze. Here, the world felt calmer, as though time moved more slowly beneath the shade. Amphitryon waited there, leaning on a staff. "You rise early," Amphitryon said. Heracles nodded. "Sleep leaves me quickly, father. I feel as though there is always something to do." Amphitryon studied him. A restless heart often belongs to one with great strength, but rest is as important as work. Remember that. The boy walked beside him into the grove. Birds flitted among the branches, their wings scattering small bursts of sound. The ground smelled of earth and fallen leaves, cool and damp beneath their steps. Amphitryon motioned toward a circle of stones where he often trained. "Today," he said, "you will not only use your hands, you will use your mind." Heracles tilted his head. "My mind." Amphitryon set the staff upright in the ground. "Strength can move stones, but wisdom moves men. If you wish to walk in this world, you must know more than power. You must know measure, patience, and choice." Heracles sat upon one of the stones, waiting. Amphitryon crouched beside him and drew lines in the dirt with his finger. "Tell me, if you face an enemy weaker than you, what do? The boy thought for a moment. "Defeat him quickly." Amphitryon shook his head. "If you crush him without thought, you will make him hate you. If you let him believe he can match you, you win his respect. And sometimes respect is worth more than victory." Hercules' brow furrowed. "Then I must always hold back?" "Not always. But you must learn when to use strength and when to soften it." The boy leaned forward, tracing his own lines in the dirt. His hands were large now, his fingers long and firm, yet he moved them carefully. "But what if I hold back, and it brings danger to those I love?" Amphitryon looked at him with quiet pride. "Then your heart must choose. No one, not even the gods, can give you every answer. That is what makes you human." The words sank deep, like seed in soil. Heracles did not speak for some time. He listened to the rustle of the leaves, the distant sound of women drawing water from the well, the faint laughter of children playing. The world seemed simple in those sounds, yet his heart felt anything but simple. In the days that followed, Amphitryon taught him not only the staff but the bow and arrow, the sword and the chariot. Heracles learned quickly. His arms steadied the bow so firmly that even the wind seemed powerless against him. His sword strikes rang clear, sending sparks when they met stone. Horses obeyed his hands with ease, as though they too felt his strength. Yet beyond skill, Amphitryon guided his son toward patience. He would ask him to stand still for long hours, watching the wind move through grass. He would tell him to listen to the sound of silence until he could hear the faintest rustle of a lizard beneath a rock. "Control begins in stillness," he would say. "A man who cannot be still cannot be wise." Heracles obeyed, though the stillness tested him more than battle ever could. His body longed for movement, his muscles for action. Yet slowly, with time, he learned to sit beneath the olive trees and let the world move around him. He learned to feel the rhythm of the wind, the breath of the earth, the heartbeat of silence itself. One evening, while he sat beneath the trees, Alcmene came quietly and placed a hand on his shoulder. He looked up to see her eyes shining with the soft glow of dusk. "You grow stronger each day," she said, "but I pray you grow gentler too. Do not let strength harden your heart. Let it widen it." Heracles touched her hand. "I try, mother. But sometimes it feels as though something inside me pushes always forward, as though I must break through whatever stands in my way." Her eyes softened with sorrow and pride together. "Perhaps that is your nature. But even rivers, though they rush, find their path not by force alone, but by flowing around stones. Remember this." Heracles listened, the words sinking into him like water into thirsty ground. The next day, while helping in the fields, another test arrived. The storm had passed through in the night, and one of the great trees had fallen across a farmer's path. Its trunk was massive, its branches tangled, and men gathered, trying in vain to move it. Heracles approached, the earth still wet beneath his feet. He placed his hands upon the trunk, rough with bark, damp with rain. The men stepped back, murmuring. Slowly, with steady breath, he lifted. His shoulders strained, his muscles tightened, yet he did not falter. With calm persistence, he raised the tree enough to shift it aside. When it fell clear of the path, the men gasped in awe. Some praised him, others crossed themselves against misfortune. But Heracles said nothing. He only wiped the bark dust from his hands and continued to work as though nothing unusual had passed. That night, beneath the stars, he lay awake once more. His body felt strong, but his heart felt heavy with thoughts. He whispered into the quiet, "If strength is mine, then let me learn how to use it well. Let me not harm when I wish to heal." The stars gave no answer, yet their light seemed softer, as though they listened. In the distance, unseen by mortal eyes, Hera's gaze lingered still. The queen of the heavens watched the boy with quiet disdain, her heart heavy with jealousy. But within Thebes, the night wrapped itself gently around Heracles, holding him in calm silence. And as his eyes closed at last, he dreamed of rivers flowing through endless valleys, carrying him toward lands he had not yet seen. The dawn light spread across Thebes with soft gold, resting on rooftops and field alike. Heracles rose early, as always, his limbs restless with energy. He carried water, he helped his mother, he walked with his father through the olive groves. Yet a quiet stirring grew inside him, not of strength but of yearning. He had learned to hold a staff, to guide the bow, to move stone and tree. Still, his heart longed for something gentler, something that might shape his spirit as much as his arms. It was Alcmene who sensed this first. One morning, she placed her hand on her son's shoulder and said, "Strength needs harmony, my child. A heart that knows only force becomes hard, but a heart that learns beauty grows wide. I will send you to a music teacher. He will show you another kind of power." Heracles agreed, though uncertain. Music felt strange to him, like a language beyond his reach. But he trusted his mother's words. And so he was brought to Linus, a skilled musician, gentle of manners, his eyes filled with quiet patience. Linus greeted him with kindness. "Come, Heracles," he said, placing a lyre into his hands. "Let your fingers find the strings. Do not force them. Let them move like water across a stone." The lyre felt light, delicate compared to the staff or bow. Hercules' large fingers pressed too hard, at first sending harsh sounds into the air. He frowned, his brows drawn. Linus smiled softly. "Do not wrestle the strings, my boy. They do not yield to strength. They yield to grace. Think of wind through the trees, of rivers flowing over smooth rocks." Heracles tried again. His fingers brushed more lightly, and the sound shifted. Notes rose, gentle and wavering, filling the air like birdsong at dawn. He looked at Linus, surprised, and the teacher nodded. "Good. Music is not born from force, but from balance. Even the strongest river carries calm ripples at its edge." Days passed. Each morning, Heracles came to Linus, sitting in the shaded courtyard where vines curled along the walls. He practiced slowly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with sudden bursts of beauty. The lyre's strings cut softly into his fingertips, leaving tender marks, but he did not complain. He listened, he tried, he learned. In quiet moments, as notes drifted upward, Heracles felt something new awaken within him. His heart slowed, his breath steadied, and the restlessness inside him softened. The music seemed to remind him that not all power needed to be heavy. Some power was light, like air moving unseen yet carrying all things. But the boy was still young, his temper not yet tamed. One afternoon, as he struggled with a new melody, his fingers stumbled again and again. The notes broke, sharp and uneven. His frustration grew, pressing into his chest. Linus placed a calming hand on his arm. "Patience, Heracles. Even the gods did not shape the world in a single day. The boy tightened his jaw. But my hands can move stones, can calm bulls, and can hold weapons. Why will they not obey here? Because music is not about hands, Linus said gently. It is about the heart. The words, though soft, struck him strangely. Something inside him burned with shame. He felt clumsy, foolish, mocked by something so delicate. His anger flared, sudden and hot. Without thinking, he struck out with his hand. The blow landed heavy against Linus. The teacher stumbled, the lyre falling, strings snapping. Silence filled the courtyard, heavy and sharp. Hercules froze, staring at what he had done. Linus fell still. His breath was gone. The boy's chest heaved. His hand trembled. The world around him blurred, the vine swaying gently as though nothing had changed. But everything had. Alcmene arrived soon after, her face pale with sorrow. She knelt beside the fallen teacher, her hand pressed over her lips. Heracles stood rigid, his eyes wide with horror. "I did not mean," he whispered. I only lost my temper." She rose, her gaze fixed on him. "This is what I feared, my son. That strength without patience would lead to sorrow." Tears filled Hercules' eyes, though he fought them. "I did not wish him harm. I wanted only to silence my own weakness." Alcmene drew him close, holding him as she once did when he was an infant. "Then you must learn to master not only your hands but your spirit. For if you cannot, the world will tremble before you, and not with love." The city murmured with unease. Some forgave the boy, saying he did not yet understand his power. Others whispered that Hera's shadow had already touched him. Heracles heard their voices, though none spoke them to his face. They grew like echoes inside his heart, filling him with quiet fear. To ease the weight upon him, Amphitryon sent him into the field again. There, among the animals and the soil, Heracles found a calmer rhythm. He guided horses, lifted stones, and cleared paths. Yet Linus's face haunted him, gentle eyes now forever silent. One evening, sitting beneath the olive trees, he spoke aloud to the night. "I did not wish for anger. I wished only for peace. If my strength can kill without my intent, then how can I carry it safely?" The stars glowed softly above. The crickets sang. No answer came, yet the quiet itself felt like a kind of listening. Alcmene joined him, her steps soft against the earth. She sat beside him, her presence steady. "Grief is heavy," she said gently, "but it teaches. Remember this pain, Heracles. Let it remind you to hold your strength as one holds a fragile flame, carefully, so that it warms rather than burns." Heracles leaned into her embrace, his heart heavy yet softened by her words. "I will try, mother. Truly, I will try." The night wrapped around them, filled with the gentle hum of the world. The city slept, the fields rested, and the boy who had already shown the strength of a man sat quietly, learning that the greatest burden was not in his arms but in his heart. And as he closed his eyes, one thought lingered within him, quiet as a promise. "I must learn to master myself, or I will master nothing at all." The days after Linus's passing were heavy in Thebes. Whispers moved like soft winds through the city. Some pitied the boy who carried such dangerous strength. Others feared what he might become. Yet within his home, Alcmene and Amphitryon shielded him with patience. They did not scold. They did not speak harshly. Instead, they guided him toward quieter duties, where his hands could serve rather than harm. Amphitryon led Heracles into the fields, far from the crowded streets. The land stretched wide, with golden grasses waving in the wind, olive trees bending gently, and vineyards glowing with a promise of fruit. "Here," Amphitryon said, handing his son a staff of smooth wood, "learn the way of balance. The staff is not only for striking. It steadies the walker, guides the herds, clears the path. It is as much a tool as a weapon. Hold it, and it may teach you." Heracles gripped the staff, surprised by its weight. It was lighter than a club, lighter than stone, but it carried a certain firmness, as if it belonged not only to his hands but to the earth itself. He planted it in the ground, testing its feel, then walked with it through the fields. Each step found rhythm with the staff's tap, steady, measured calm. Days unfolded in this way. He guided cattle across streams, using the staff to keep them in line. He walked the edges of fields, pressing aside brambles and weeds. Sometimes he twirled it playfully, the wood whistling softly in the air. Other times he leaned upon it, resting as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with colors of rose and amber. Amphitryon watched with quiet pride. See how even a simple stick can carry many purposes? The strongest man is not he who crushes everything before him, but he who knows which strength to use at each moment. Hercules nodded. The words echoed within him, though he did not yet fully understand. In the evenings, after the animals were brought in and the day's work was done, Alcmene prepared meals of bread, olives, and honey. Heracles sat with his family, listening to their voices. He ate heartily, but spoke little, his mind turning often to Linus. The memory was a shadow, yet not one of endless darkness. Slowly, it shaped itself into a lesson, one he carried in silence. One night, as stars blossomed above, Amphitryon placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Your path is not meant to end here in the fields. You will grow. You will face trials beyond what we can see. But before you face them, you must master yourself. The world will not forgive carelessness in one so strong. Heracles looked into his father's steady eyes. I fear my anger. When it comes, it moves faster than thought. How can I hold it back? Amphitryon's gaze softened. By slowing your breath. By listening to the silence between heartbeats. By remembering not only what you can do, but what you must choose not to do. The words wrapped around Heracles like a cloak. He lay awake long after, repeating them quietly, as though they were a song without melody. What I can do, and what I must choose not to do. In the following days, he carried this thought into his work. When cattle grew restless, he did not strike them. He breathed. He guided them gently with his staff. When boys in the city mocked his size, daring him to show his strength, he did not answer with blows. He turned away, though the heat of anger pressed inside his chest. Each time, the effort left him weary, but also a little freer. Still, not all tests were so simple. One afternoon, as he walked along a stream, a great wild boar burst from the brush. Its tusks gleamed, its eyes burned with fury. The farmers nearby cried out, dropping their tools and running. Heracles held his ground, the staff firm in his grip. The beast charged. Its hooves thundered against the earth. Dust rose in clouds. For a moment, the boy's breath quickened, his pulse racing. His hands itched for a stone, for sheer force. But he remembered his father's words. Slowly, he steadied his breath. Slowly, he lifted the staff. As the boar rushed forward, Heracles stepped aside, guiding the staff across its flank. The beast stumbled, its charge broken. It wheeled around, snorting, then lunged again. Once more Heracles moved, calm, and measured. Each motion guided, not crushed. At last, the boar turned, frightened by what it could not overcome. It vanished into the thicket, leaving the field in silence. The farmers returned, their voices filled with wonder. You spared it, one said. Why did you not strike it down? Heracles lowered his staff, his breath calm once more. Because it was enough to guide it away. It needed no more than that. That night, Alcmene looked at her son with quiet pride. You are learning, my child. You are learning the strength that heals rather than harms. Heracles felt warmth in his chest, a gentleness that spread through him like sunlight across water. He still remembered Linus, still carried the weight of that moment, but now it no longer bound him only in sorrow. It had become a turning, a beginning of wisdom. Seasons shifted. Vines ripened, fields turned golden, and Heracles grew taller, broader, stronger. His staff became an extension of himself, light in his hands though sturdy in use. He carried it everywhere, even into the city, where people now looked at him with mixed awe and unease. They saw the boy becoming a man, and they wondered what the gods intended for him. Yet within Heracles, a softer voice began to grow. It whispered of patience, a balance of choice. Sometimes it was his father's words, sometimes his mother's, sometimes only his own breath moving steady within him. One evening, beneath the glow of twilight, he leaned upon his staff and watched the stars awaken. The air was cool, the crickets sang, and the olive trees rustled softly. In that quiet moment, he felt a thought rise within him, clear and gentle. Perhaps true strength is not in how much I can hold, but in how carefully I choose to hold it. The thought lingered, soft as starlight, carrying him into dreams. And in those dreams, shadows of distant trials began to stir, trials that would one day test not only his arms but the gentleness he now worked to protect. The staff had taught Hercules patience. The fields had shown him rhythm. But Amphitryon knew that one day his son would need to master more than guidance and restraint. He would need to learn the art of the bow. For the bow was not only a weapon of distance, it was a teacher of focus, of silence, of waiting for the right moment. So one morning, as mist still clung to the hills, Amphitryon placed a bow in Hercules' hands. It was crafted from strong yew wood, smooth and curved with care. The string, stretched tight, hummed softly when touched, like a voice waiting to be heard. Heracles held it with curiosity. The weight was different from the staff, lighter, yet tense with hidden power. He pulled at the string, and it resisted, quivering under his touch. This, Amphitryon said, is not a tool of anger. It listens to patience. The arrow flies only when the hand, the eye, and the breath move together. It will not forgive haste. They walked into the hills, where tall grasses swayed and stones glimmered with dew. Birds darted overhead, their wings catching the light. Amphitryon set a simple target, a circle of wood against a tree. He placed an arrow in Hercules' hand. Hold it steady, not too tight. Let your arm guide, but let your breath command. Heracles raised the bow. His arms trembled slightly under the strain. He lost the arrow too quickly, and it struck the earth far from the mark. Again he tried, his jaw tightening, his heart racing with frustration. The second arrow flew wide. The third landed closer, but still missed. Amphitryon laid a calming hand on his shoulder. Do not chase the target. Still yourself and let the target come to you. The boy frowned, uncertain. Yet he listened. He slowed his breath. He watched the circle not with anger, but with quiet waiting. When at last he lost the arrow, it sang through the air and struck the wooden board with a solid thud. Hercules' eyes widened. He looked at his father, who nodded. Better. The arrow obeys when the spirit is calm. Each shot is not about force, but about the silence you carry within. The training continued. Day after day, Heracles returned to the hills, the bow in hand. He missed many times, each miss a lesson. He learned to feel the wind, to notice the slope of the earth, to listen to the rustle of leaves. Slowly, his arrows found their place. They struck not with anger, but with measured intent. Sometimes he sat in the grass after practice, lying on his back, the bow across his chest. He watched the clouds drift, shapes forming and fading. He thought of Linus, of the music that had slipped through his fingers. He thought of the staff, steady and guiding. And he thought of the bow, patient and watchful. Each tool seemed to whisper a piece of wisdom, though softly, as though waiting for him to discover it fully in time. One afternoon, while he practiced, a deer stepped quietly into the clearing. Its eyes were gentle, its steps cautious. Heracles raised his bow, his breath held. He could strike, and surely his arrow would find its mark. Yet as he gazed at the creature, his heart wavered. The deer's presence was not a threat, but a gift of stillness. Slowly, he lowered the bow. The deer flicked its ears, then leapt away, vanishing into the trees. Amphitryon, watching from a distance, approached. Why did you not shoot? Heracles lowered his eyes. Because I wished not to. The arrow carried no need. His father studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled, proud and quiet. That is wisdom, my son. To know not only how to strike, but when not to. Seasons changed again. The hills grew bright with wildflowers, then golden with heat, then pale with frost. Through it all, Hercules' strength grew, but so too did his calm. His hands could draw the bow with ease, but more importantly, his spirit had learned to wait, to listen, to choose. Yet the path was not without challenges. There were days when anger surged, when missed shots burned like shame, when the laughter of other boys stung his pride. Once, in a fit of temper, he snapped an arrow across his knee, the sound sharp as thunder. But almost at once, guilt settled in, and he remembered Linus. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, and the anger passed like a storm clearing from the sky. In the evenings, Alcmene often found him sitting quietly beneath the olive trees, the bough resting beside him. "Do you speak to the stars, my child?" she asked once, smiling. Heracles nodded faintly. "I do not speak. I listen. They seem to whisper, though I do not yet know their words." She kissed his brow, her voice tender. "Perhaps one day you will. Until then, keep listening." The city began to notice the change in him. He still towered above other youths, his shoulders broad, his arms strong. But there was a calmness in his gaze, a steadiness in his walk. He no longer rushed, no longer let anger burst unchecked. Instead, he carried himself like the hills themselves, firm, patient, enduring. Still, whispers of his fate stirred quietly among elders and neighbors. "He is too great to remain here forever," some said. "The gods watch him. His path will not be a simple one." Heracles heard none of this. He rose with the dawn, he worked the fields, he trained with staff and bow. His world was steady, his rhythm calm. Yet within his dreams, shadows of distant trials continued to stir, faint and waiting. One evening, as twilight deepened, he stood upon a hilltop, the bow in his hand. The horizon glowed with the last light of day. He drew the string, not with anger, not with haste, but with ease. The arrow flew, swift and true, striking the mark as though it had always belonged there. Heracles lowered the bow, his breath steady, his spirit quiet. And as the stars began to shine, a thought moved within him like a soft river. Perhaps true strength is not only in the arm, but in the silence that guides it. The night carried this thought forward, leading him gently toward the next chapter of his journey, where the lessons of staff and bow would prepare him for trials still unseen. The early morning mist clung to the hills, soft and cooling, as the sun began to spill pale gold across the fields of Thebes. Heracles walked slowly toward the river, his staff in hand, and his thoughts turned inward. The bow had taught him patience, the staff had taught him balance, and the music of Linus, though now silent, still lingered in memory, a gentle reminder of lessons learned too late. Water ran clear over smooth stones, whispering softly as it moved. The sound, steady and soothing, called him closer. Heracles knelt at the edge, dipping his hands into the cool flow. The water ran over his palms, cold and sharp, but comforting. He held it for a moment, watching the ripples spread across the surface, each one fading slowly, merging into the next. Amphitryon approached from behind, his steps quiet on the soft earth. "The river teaches, my son," he said. "See how it moves around stones, around fallen branches. It does not rage against them. It finds the path forward." Heracles lifted his gaze. "Yet sometimes it must cut through rock to continue," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Yes," Amphitryon replied, "but it does so patiently, without force beyond was needed. That is the measure of strength." The boy dipped his hand again, letting the water drip between his fingers. He thought of the wild boar, of the arrow, of Linus. Each moment had tested him in different ways. Each choice had carried weight. And yet here, at the river, he felt the quiet pulse of decision, without rush, without anger. Amphitryon gestured toward a cluster of stones across the water. "We will practice today not with bow or staff, but with stones. You will learn how weight moves and how balance carries it. Strength is not only what you can lift, but how you lift it and what you choose to lift." Heracles picked up a flat stone, cool and smooth beneath his palm. He lifted it, turning it over thoughtfully, then set it down gently. Again he tried heavier stones this time, lifting, carrying, and placing them carefully along the riverbank. The rhythm was slow, meditative, and steady. Each stone tested his patience more than his muscles. Some slipped, some tumbled, and he learned to anticipate their movement rather than overpower them. Hours passed in quiet repetition. The birds above sang soft songs, and the river murmured beside him. Each placement of stone felt like a small decision, yet he understood that even these small choices shaped his understanding of power. Strength without care could topple a stone too far, disturb the river's flow, or harm something unintended. By mid-afternoon, the sun warmed his back. He paused and looked across the river at the hills beyond. Their edges were softened by distance, yet clearly defined in shape and shadow. He thought of the long journey ahead, of paths he had not yet walked, and trials he could not yet see. The weight of possibility pressed gently upon him, not heavy, but present. "Do you understand, my son?" Amphitryon asked, standing behind him. "Strength is not only the arm or the hand. It is the mind, the heart, and the choices that guide them." Hercules nodded. "I see. It is not enough to be strong. I must know why I am strong, and for what." His father smiled. "Exactly. And one day, the world will demand that understanding from you, more than any stone or bow or staff ever could." The boy spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet practice. He lifted stones, set them in careful patterns along the riverbank, and watched the water adjust around them. He felt a rhythm in the work, a calm flow that reminded him of music, of arrows, of the dance of the staff. Even the mistakes become lessons. A stone that slipped and tumbled forced him to reconsider, to approach differently, to anticipate rather than react. When the sun began its slow descent, painting the river with gold and rose, Heracles stood, stretching his arms above his head. He breathed deeply, feeling the air fill his lungs, steadying the pulse in his chest. The river flowed endlessly before him, carrying reflections of clouds, of hills, of himself. He pressed a hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and whispered softly, "Strength is my gift, but choice is my guide." The evening brought quiet shadows over the hills. Fireflies blinked in soft patterns, and the crickets sang their gentle song. Heracles walked home slowly, the river's sound fading behind him, but its lesson lingering. He passed through the olive groves, touched the cool bark of the trees, and felt a sense of peace settle around him, though he knew it was not permanent. There would be trials yet, challenges that would stretch him in ways he could not foresee. As he reached the courtyard, Alcmene greeted him with a smile and a warm embrace. "The river has taught you well, my son," she said softly. "Do not forget that strength without thought or care can be a burden. You are learning to carry it lightly, but with purpose." Heracles rested against her, feeling her steady heartbeat, the warmth of her hands. "I am learning, mother. Slowly, but I am learning." That night, as he lay beneath the stars, he thought of the river, of the stones, of the wild boar, and of the bow. Each had tested him, each had asked for patience and care. And within him, a quiet certainty grew. The strength of his body must always be guided by the quiet of his mind and the gentleness of his heart. He drifted into sleep with that thought held softly, a light in the darkness, carrying him toward the days ahead. Dreams came gently, filled with flowing rivers, soaring arrows, and fields of endless stones, all reminding him of the careful path he must follow. And somewhere far above, where the gods moved in silence, eyes watched the boy with interest, some in hope, some in envy, and some with quiet curiosity. Heracles did not know them yet, but he felt, faintly, that the choices he made, even in small, unseen moments, would one day shape not only his own life, but the world around him. The evening settled slowly over Thebes, soft shadows stretching across the olive groves as the wind whispered through silver leaves. Heracles walked among the trees, his staff tucked lightly under one arm. The day had been long, spent guiding cattle and practicing patience beside the river, yet he felt a quiet energy within him, a steady pulse, not of restlessness, but of awareness. The olive trees stood like silent sentinels. Their gnarled trunks and delicate leaves shimmered in the fading light, casting shifting patterns on the ground. Each tree seemed to breathe with the wind, a subtle rhythm Heracles began to notice, like the quiet music Linus had once coaxed from strings. He ran his hand along the bark, feeling every groove and twist, and a sense of calm spread through him. Alcmene's voice floated softly from the courtyard. "Heracles, come, my son. Supper is ready." Heracles turned and made his way back, the smell of fresh bread and honey drawing him like a gentle current. The warmth of the fire within the home greeted him as he entered, and he saw his father already seated, hands resting on the table. Amphitryon's eyes held the same quiet strength he always carried, steady as a river flowing through the hills. As they ate, the conversation was soft, gentle, and unhurried. They spoke of simple things, plans for the fields, the growth of olives and vines, the approach of autumn. Heracles listened, absorbing not only the words but the rhythm of the household, the warmth of family, the subtle presence of care and attention. After supper, Alcmene drew him to a quiet corner of the courtyard. The air had grown cooler, and the first stars had begun to glimmer faintly. "It is time," she said softly, "for you to learn the gift of sleep and the strength that comes with rest." Heracles tilted his head, curious. "Sleep? How can that teach strength?" Alcmene smiled gently. "Strength is not only in action. It is also in stillness and renewal. The body must recover, the mind must reflect. Even the strongest river rests in pools along its path. Even the sharpest wind slows to a whisper at night. You will find that sleep guides you as much as any bough, staff, or stone." She led him to a small bed in the corner, soft with blankets woven from wool and flax. "Close your eyes. Let the day's lessons settle. Breathe deeply, as you do when guiding the river or aiming the bow. Let your muscles loosen. Let your mind wander gently through the quiet of your heart." Heracles lay down, the blankets warm against his skin, the air cool on his face. He breathed slowly, thinking of the river, the stones, the bow, and the staff. He remembered the wild boar, the fallen arrow, the lessons of Linus. Each memory came softly, without judgment, and he let them flow through him like gentle currents. Outside, the olive trees whispered in the wind, the crickets sang their night song, and the stars blinked faintly above. Heracles imagined the branches swaying, carrying small silver sparks like echoes of music. His eyelids grew heavy, and the pulse of his heart slowed, steadying into a rhythm that matched the night itself. As he drifted, he dreamt, not of battle or challenge, but of quiet places. He walked through hills bathed in moonlight, rivers winding calmly beneath stars, stones placed carefully along banks as if by unseen hands. The bow rested across his back, the staff at his side, and he moved with ease, graceful and patient. In the dream, he met Linus. The teacher's face was soft, serene, and he nodded at Heracles without words. Heracles lifted a hand in greeting, feeling a warmth in his chest. The silence spoke more than any voice could, and he understood, in a way he had not before, that strength carried a quiet responsibility, that patience and care could guide even the mightiest force. He awoke softly as the night deepened, the moonlight pale and gentle through the window. His body felt renewed, his mind lighter, his heart steadier. The lessons of the day settled within him, no longer restless thoughts, but quiet knowledge carried like a stone in a pocket, weighty yet manageable. Amphitryon appeared at the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You slept well?" he asked. Heracles nodded. "I think I understand now. Strength is not only what I can do, but how I rest, how I wait, how I move without haste." His father smiled, stepping closer. "Exactly. One day, you will face trials where patience and calm will protect you as much as muscle and skill. Remember this, my son. Let rest guide you as much as action." The next morning, Heracles rose with the first light, carrying the memory of his restful night. He returned to the hills and the river, staff in hand, bowing at his side. Each movement was softer, more deliberate. He guided the cattle, lifted the stones, aimed the arrows, but with an awareness he had not possessed before. Each task was measured, each choice intentional. The villagers noticed the change. He still towered over other youths, still carried a strength unmatched, yet there was a calm in his gaze, a gentleness in his gestures. Children came to watch him, not in fear but with admiration. Animals moved near him without hesitation, sensing the quiet harmony in his spirit. Even the river seemed to recognize him now, the water flowing around the stones he had placed in measured patterns, carrying his small interventions downstream, blending with the world naturally. Heracles felt a sense of connection he had not known before. Strength and calm, power and patience, they could coexist. As night fell once more, Alcmene placed her hand on his shoulder. "Sleep well tonight, my son. Let the quiet carry you forward. You have learned more than you realize." Heracles nodded, lying beneath the stars with a feeling of soft wonder. The olive trees whispered above, the crickets sang, and somewhere, far above the clouds, the unseen gods watched quietly. They noted not only his growing strength, but the careful way he carried it, the patience, the gentleness, the understanding of his own heart. And in that quiet night, Heracles allowed himself to drift once more into dreams filled with rivers, stars, and soft paths winding endlessly before him, knowing that each day, each choice, each moment of stillness guided him gently toward the journey yet to come. Heracles stepped into the olive grove as the sun leaned low over the hills, its golden light casting long, wavering shadows across the soft earth. He felt the crunch of dry leaves beneath his sandals, each sound distinct, crisp, and deliberate. The wind whispered gently through the branches above, and he stretched his arms, feeling the familiar ache of muscles grown strong through years of labor, bow practice, and careful lifting. He touched the rough bark of a gnarled olive tree, tracing the grooves with his fingertips. Each ridge pressed lightly into his palm, the subtle imprint of age and patience. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the grove's quiet song, the faint rustle of leaves, the occasional creak of an old branch swaying, the soft murmur of a distant stream. It was a rhythm unlike any other, steady yet alive, and he let his chest rise and fall in time with it. He carried his staff lightly in one hand, letting it tap against the ground with each measured step. The gentle percussion reminded him of the river, of arrows flying, of stones he had guided and balanced by hand. Each tap seemed to speak, not with words, but with understanding. He felt a quiet energy settling in his limbs, not restless, not sharp, but deliberate and patient. Heracles knelt beside a small patch of wildflowers peeking through the grove's undergrowth. Their petals were soft, cool to the touch, and he inhaled their faint, sweet scent. He ran his fingers across each blossom, noticing the subtle differences, the curve of petal, the tiny veins that marked it delicate and living. A bee hovered for a moment, wings buzzing softly, then drifted away in the wind. He watched its flight, careful and deliberate, and thought, even the smallest creatures carry patience in their motion. He lifted his staff and began walking deeper into the groove, the shadows thickening as the sun lowered further. A fallen branch pressed against his sandal, and he shifted it aside gently, mindful of its weight and balance. Every step through the grove became a lesson in quiet awareness, a careful negotiation of what he touched, what he moved, and what he let remain as it was. A rustle in the underbrush made him freeze. His pulse quickened, not with fear, but with attentiveness. From behind a thick olive tree, a small fox emerged, eyes wide and luminous in the dimming light. Its fur glimmered faintly, catching the last rays of the sun. Heracles lowered his staff slowly, feeling his hands steady as he knelt to observe. The fox did not approach, only paused, sniffing the air, alert yet cautious. Heracles held his breath and thought, I do not need to strike. I do not need to move. I can simply be here, and it will move as it must. The fox's gaze met him for a long moment. Heracles felt a strange sense of kinship, as if they understood each other without speaking. The creature turned silently and disappeared among the shadows of the grove, leaving only the soft sound of leaves brushing together. Heracles exhaled slowly, a warmth settling in his chest, a quiet satisfaction that came not from action but from restraint. He rose and continued through the grove, each step slow, deliberate, careful. He observed the patterns of light across the ground, the way shadows shifted with each movement of the branches above. He noticed insects crawling over fallen leaves, the subtle scent of damp earth rising to his nose, the softness of moss clinging to stones. Each detail filled his mind without burden, guiding him into a state of calm alertness. By the edge of a clearing, he found a small stream shimmering faintly in the fading light. He knelt and cupped the water in his hands, feeling it cool and smooth as it slipped between his fingers. The current was gentle but persistent, flowing around small stones and fallen twigs without haste. He let the water pass through his hands slowly, watching how it carried tiny leaves and seed along with it, bending and moving around obstacles instead of forcing them aside. Heracles dipped his hands again, letting the water wash over his wrists and arms. He felt a deep satisfaction in the simplicity of the act and the quiet lesson it offered. Even the strongest force can move gently, he thought, and even the heaviest burden can be carried lightly if I choose carefully. He lifted his gaze to the grove, where shadows stretched long and soft, brushing over roots and stones like delicate fingers. The setting sun painted the trees in warm gold and rose hues, and he traced the edges of each shadow with his eyes, noticing the tiny details, the way a leaf curled, The flicker of light across a stone, the gentle sway of a branch that had stood there for decades. Each movement seemed deliberate, purposeful, alive in its quiet way. Hercules paused beneath a particularly large olive tree, pressing his palm to the trunk. Its bark was rough and warm from the sun, yet softened by the shadow it provided. He pressed his forehead lightly against it and closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep through him. He imagined the river, the bough, the stones he had lifted, and the fox that had appeared quietly in the shadows. All of them carried lessons: patience, observation, choice, restraint. All of them whispered in ways he could feel, but not yet fully understand. A sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves above, carrying with it the faint scent of earth, flowers, and distant water. Heracles inhaled deeply, letting the air fill his lungs. He felt the steady beat of his heart, the tension in his muscles softening as he exhaled. He whispered softly to himself, "I will move carefully. I will watch. I will choose my path with thought." The grove seemed to respond to his presence, the shadows shifting gently, leaves flickering as if in acknowledgement. He walked along the edge of the clearing, staff in hand, moving slowly over uneven stones, careful not to disturb the quiet life of the grove. Every step was measured, deliberate, thoughtful. He noticed a small snail making its way across a leaf, an insect climbing a branch, the subtle glimmer of water in a tiny pool. The world was alive in its smallest details, and he moved within it with attention, not haste. He paused once more at the stream, cupping water again in his hands. He felt the cool flow pass between his fingers and thought the choices he had made in the past: the wild boar, the broken lyre, the arrows that missed or hit their mark. Each choice carried weight, he realized, but restraint made even mistakes lighter. Strength is not only what I can do, but what I choose not to do. The shadows grew long and dark as the sun disappeared beyond the hills. Fireflies began to blink softly, their tiny lights flickering like distant stars fallen to the earth. Heracles watched them drift over the grass, moving with purpose yet seeming to float on air. He felt a strange kinship with their quiet motion, a reminder that even in small things, careful action held power. Finally, he turned toward home, walking slowly through the grove, his staff tapping softly against the ground. He felt the soft cool of the evening air on his skin, the subtle scent of olives and earth filling his senses. He thought of the river, the bough, the stones, the fox, the gentle lessons of patience, observation, and restraint. He carried them with him, not as burdens, but as quiet guides along the path he walked. He pressed a hand to his chest and whispered, "I will carry my strength carefully. I will move with thought. I will learn from every step and every shadow." The grove shrank behind him, dark and peaceful, filled with whispers of wind and rustling leaves. Heracles felt a soft certainty settle in him, not pride, not arrogance, but quiet understanding. His strength, he realized, could be gentle, deliberate, and guided by the quiet lessons of the world around him. The stars began to appear above the hills, pale points of light scattered across the darkening sky. Heracles traced their paths with his gaze, imagining the long journeys they made silently across the heavens. He felt a subtle kinship with their persistence, their quiet illumination, and he breathed deeply, letting the calm of the night seep into his bones. With each step toward home, he felt himself growing, not only in strength, but in understanding, in patience, and quiet attention. The grove, the stream, the fox, the shadows, all of it had shaped him, as much as any bough or staff. And he knew that the journey ahead, whatever it might bring, would find him ready to meet it with care, with thought, and with a steady heart. Heracles rose early, before the sun had climbed fully above the hills. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp soil and wildflowers. He felt it settle against his skin, soft and cool, and he inhaled slowly, letting it fill his lungs as he stretched his arms. The grove from the previous evening had left its quiet mark on him. Each breath felt deeper, more deliberate, as if the land itself had taught him a rhythm he had not known before. He carried his staff along the narrow path to the fields where the cattle grazed. The morning mist clung to the grass, shimmering faintly as he walked. Every blade seemed alive beneath his fingers as he brushed against them lightly. He knelt beside a small cluster of wildflowers at the edge of the path, bending close to inhale their fragrance. The scent was faint but sweet, a reminder that life persisted quietly, even when unseen. The cattle moved slowly, heads low, chewing the fresh grass. Hercules guided them gently, his voice soft and even. He felt the muscles in his arms and legs tense and release with each motion, the weight of responsibility pressing lightly against him. Each step mattered, each hand movement deliberate, as if the land itself had a pulse he needed to match. He paused near a stone wall bordering the field, running his fingers along its rough surface. Each stone had been placed carefully, shaped and stacked by hands long gone, yet still steady, enduring. He lifted one, heavier than it seemed, and carried it slowly to fill a small gap along the wall. Sweat beaded on his forehead, warm and persistent, yet it felt natural, a companion to effort and care. The sun climbed higher, spilling warmth across the fields. Hercules paused, standing among the cattle, feeling the heat press gently against his shoulders. The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of water over the hills, the faint hum of bees in the wildflowers, and the rustle of trees along the path. He let it brush against his face, noticing each sound in turn. A sudden movement caught his eye. A hare darted from the underbrush, its fur flashing white against the green. Hercules froze, holding his staff lightly at his side, watching. The hare paused, sniffing the air, its small nose twitching, before bounding away toward the distant hills. He exhaled softly, feeling the familiar pulse of calm settle in his chest. He thought of the river, the grove, the fox. All things move with care, he thought. All things follow a path if we watch and wait. He adjusted the position of the staff in his hands, letting its weight guide his balance as he moved among the cattle. By midday, Hercules found himself beside a large boulder near the center of the field. He knelt, pressing both hands against its rough surface, feeling the warmth of the sun along the stone's curve. He tried lifting it, and it resisted, heavy and grounded. Sweat ran down his arms, yet he did not strain too hard. Instead, he shifted his feet, tested his grip, and allowed the stone to move slowly, deliberately, until it was positioned exactly where he intended. The act was not easy, nor was it done in haste. Each movement required thought, attention, and patience. Hercules felt the muscles in his back and arms tighten, then relax, the rhythm of effort and release a quiet meditation. He noticed the cool breeze brushing across the top of the stone, the soft sound of grass brushing against his knees, and the faint hum of insects nearby. He leaned back against the boulder, letting his hands rest on its surface. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, steady and unwavering. He pressed his palm lightly against the warm stone and closed his eyes, feeling the connection between his body and the land. Strength, he realized, was not only in muscles, but in attention and care, in the deliberate placement of effort. A hawk circled high above, wings spread wide, gliding effortlessly on the wind. Hercules watched its motion, tracing the slow, patient curves it made across the sky. He imagined himself moving with that same ease, every motion intentional, guided not by force alone but by thought. The hawk dipped, rose, and disappeared beyond the hills, and he felt a quiet admiration for its skill, a lesson in observation and grace. He returned to the cattle, guiding them gently to new grazing areas. He lifted fallen branches, adjusted fences, and moved stones to clear paths, each action carried out with care and attention. The hours passed in a quiet rhythm, the sun traveling steadily across the sky, its warmth settling into his muscles and skin. By late afternoon, he paused beside a small stream running through the field. He knelt and cupped the water, letting it wash over his hands and wrists. The flow was gentle but insistent, moving around stones and small branches without haste. He watched the current carry tiny leaves and petals downstream, and he thought of the choices he had made in his life. The bough, the river, the grove, the stones, and how each choice had shaped him, quietly and steadily. Hercules closed his eyes, feeling the sun warm his back, the water cool against his hands, and the soft breeze brushing his cheeks. He imagined paths winding across the fields, rivers, hills, and groves, each step deliberate, each action measured. He breathed slowly, in time with the natural rhythm of the land. Strength is not only what I can lift or move, he thought. It is how I move, how I guide, how I carry even the smallest things with care. Evening began to fall, the sky painted in soft hues of gold and rose. Hercules walked slowly toward the hill overlooking the fields, staff in hand, and paused at the crest. The view stretched endlessly before him, fields, groves, streams, and distant hills fading into shadow. He felt a quiet pride, not in power, not in size, but in attention, care, and measured effort. Each stone moved, each animal guided, each breath taken with thought had shaped the day. He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and whispered softly, "I will carry my strength carefully. I will move with thought. I will listen to the land, and it will guide me." The stars began to appear, faint points of light scattered across the darkening sky. Fireflies blinked softly among the grass below, tiny, deliberate illuminations moving gently through the night. Hercules watched them, tracing their motion with his gaze, and he felt a sense of kinship with their persistence and quiet presence. The moon rose, pale and calm, illuminating the fields in soft silver. Hercules walked down the hill, staff tapping lightly against the ground. He passed the stream, the stones, the groves, and the edges of the fields, feeling the earth beneath his feet and the rhythm of his own body in harmony with it. By the time he returned home, the night was fully descended, calm and still. Alcmene had left a lamp burning in the courtyard, its golden light soft against the cool air. Heracles entered quietly, setting his staff aside, and felt the weight of the day settle softly in his limbs. He carried it as he carried all things now, with awareness, care, and thought. He lay down beneath the stars visible through the open roof of the courtyard, feeling the night air cool against his skin, the warmth of the day lingering in his muscles. He imagined the fields, the stones, the stream, and the hawks circling above. He breathed slowly, feeling the rhythm of his heart steady, the pulse of life beneath the earth beneath him steady and unhurried. "I am ready for what comes next," he thought, feeling neither pride nor fear. "I am ready because I move with thought. I am strong because I carry carefully. I am learning to guide not only my arms, but my choices, and they will carry me further than any battle, any challenge, or any arrow ever could." And in that quiet night, Heracles allowed himself to drift, fully aware, fully attentive, yet completely at ease, into the gentle currents of sleep that awaited him, carrying with him the lessons of the fields, the stones, and the steady rhythm of the earth. Heracles awoke to the soft call of a distant bird, its note cutting through the cool morning air like a gentle bell. The fields were still half-shadowed, mist curling along the edges of the grass and between the olive trees. He rose quietly, feeling the lingering warmth of yesterday's sun in his muscles, and stretched, letting his arms rise above his head. The rhythm of his breath and heartbeat felt steady, calm, and deliberate. He took up his staff and walked toward the hills that rose beyond the cattle fields. A narrow path led through low brush and scattered stones, and he traced it carefully, noticing the way the wind bent the grass and how the sun's first rays touched the tips of the leaves. Each step grounded him, the earth firm beneath his feet, carrying his weight evenly as he climbed. The hills held a small secret, a cave hidden among the rocks and brambles. Heracles had discovered before, drawn by curiosity and the soft echo of water deep inside. Today he approached it deliberately, sensing that it offered more than shelter. It offered a lesson in patience and careful observation. The entrance was dark, shadowed, and cool. He paused, letting his eyes adjust. The stone walls felt damp beneath his fingertips as he stepped inside, tracing the rough surface. The air smelled of earth, moss, and faint water. He knelt, listening to the quiet drip of condensation, the soft echo of his own breath, and the distant trickle of a small underground stream. He ran his hand over a smooth stone at the cave's edge, lifting it slowly. It was heavier than he expected, yet balanced perfectly in his grip. He carried it a short distance deeper into the cave, placing it gently in a corner. The sound of it settling against the stone floor was soft, almost musical. He felt the pulse of his arms and legs as he moved, noticing the subtle shifts in muscle tension, the way his weight shifted with each step. Heracles stood still for a long moment, closing his eyes. The darkness of the cave was not frightening. It was steady, silent, full of its own presence. He imagined the river, the grove, the stones he had moved, the fox he had watched. All of them had taught him the careful, patient use of strength. The cave now taught him something new, the quiet, enduring nature of endurance itself. He knelt beside a shallow pool inside the cave. The water was cool, reflecting faint light from the entrance. He dipped his fingers in slowly, watching the ripples spread, carrying tiny flecks of stone and moss along the surface. He moved his hands deliberately, feeling the resistance of the water, the smoothness of the pebbles beneath his palms. Strength is not always force, he thought. Sometimes it is patience, observation, and the careful placement of effort. A sudden shift in the cave's air made him glance upward. Tiny bats stirred, fluttering softly against the ceiling, their wings brushing the stone. He remained still, letting them pass, marveling at the quiet precision of their flight. Even the smallest creatures carry skill and care, he thought. I can learn from them if I watch and wait. Hercules moved deeper into the cave, his staff tapping softly against the stone floor. Each tap echoed, a subtle rhythm he matched with his own steps and breath. He noticed the faint texture of the walls, the damp moss that softened rough edges, the way the light from the entrance faded slowly into shadow. Every detail mattered. Every sound carried meaning. He paused at a narrow fissure where the cave opened into a small chamber. The air was cooler here, stiller, and the soft drip of water sounded like a heartbeat. Heracles knelt and pressed his palms against the floor, feeling the solidity of the earth beneath him. He lifted his body slowly, then gently set it down, moving deliberately to test his strength without strain. Each motion felt purposeful, like the measured flow of the river, like the careful placement of stones along the bank. The shadows shifted as the day outside moved forward. Light filtered through the entrance, painting faint patterns on the walls. Heracles ran his fingers along the stone again, imagining the hands that had built walls, carved stones, or placed rocks carefully over the years. Each touch connected him to the unseen past, to the continuity of effort, patience, and thoughtful strength. He thought again of the bow and the wild boar, of the river and the grove. Each challenge had taught him something about his body, his mind, and the decisions he made. The cave added another layer, a lesson in stillness, endurance, and the quiet power of observation. He lifted a small pile of pebbles, placing them in a line along a ledge. The sound of the stones sliding together was soft and deliberate. He imagined arranging them for hours, adjusting their positions with care, letting them fall naturally when needed. Hours passed in quiet exploration. Heracles moved through the chambers of the cave, lifting, observing, kneeling, and rising. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but was gentle, the work not driven by haste or anger, but by focus and thought. Each motion, each careful placement of hands and feet, strengthened not only his body, but his understanding of movement, patience, and balance. A breeze drifted through the entrance, carrying the scent of earth and grass from outside. Heracles inhaled deeply, letting it fill his lungs. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. He imagined the fields, the river, the grove, and now this cave, all part of a larger rhythm he could follow if he remained attentive. By late afternoon, he climbed to a small ledge overlooking the cave's deeper shadows. The stones beneath him were cool, the air still, and he felt a steady calm settle over his shoulders. He watched dust motes drift lazily through the fading light, catching on the edges of rocks and small plants. Each movement was quiet, deliberate, part of a pattern larger than himself. Heracles sat on the ledge, staff across his knees, and let his mind rest. He imagined the sun setting over the hills, the olive groves, the flowing river, and the fox that had watched him so calmly. Each image was vivid, filled with color, sound, and texture. He felt a strange kinship with all of it, as if the land, the animals, and the stones were teachers, and he was a student who could finally understand the subtle lessons they offered. He pressed his palms together and rested his forehead lightly against them, feeling the warmth of his hands, the cool air of the cave, and the steady rhythm of his heart. Strength is measured not only in what I can lift, but in how I move, how I wait, and how I watch, he thought. I am learning to carry more than stones. I am learning to carry myself with care. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting the cave in muted shadows, Heracles rose slowly. He traced the walls with his hands one last time, lifting a small pile of stones to a safe place, and stepped toward the entrance. The breeze felt warmer now, carrying scents of the fields, the river, and the distant grove. He paused at the threshold, looking back into the shadowed chambers. I will return, he thought quietly. There is more to learn here, more patience to hold, more care to practice. He stepped into the fading light outside. The hills glowed softly under the evening sky, and he moved toward home with deliberate, steady steps. Each movement carried the lessons of the cave, the quiet endurance, the measured effort, the careful observation, woven into the rhythm of his body. By the time he reached the edge of the fields, night had fallen. The stars were pale points above the hills, and the soft silver light illuminated the path. Hercules walked slowly, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each sound deliberate, each breath measured. The world around him was calm, yet alive with motion and meaning. He paused briefly at the stream that ran along the edge of the fields. The water shimmered faintly, reflecting the stars and the soft light of the moon. He knelt, letting his fingers trail across the surface, feeling the cool flow and the subtle current beneath. He thought of the fox, the hawk, the river, the grove, and now the cave. Each had guided him, each had taught him, each had shown him a different facet of strength, patience, and care. Hercules rose, feeling the night air cool against his skin, and continued toward home. The stars seemed to follow him, scattered like distant lanterns across the sky. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and whispered softly to himself, "I carry more than strength. I carry thought, care, and understanding. I'll move with them now, and they will guide me further than I have ever walked." Hercules woke before dawn, the air cool and soft against his skin. A faint mist clung to the earth, curling around the stones and the roots of olive trees as he stepped outside. The fields and hills lay silent, only the soft murmur of the river in the distance breaking the calm. He walked slowly, bare feet pressing into the damp soil, feeling the subtle rise and fall beneath each step. The rhythm of the earth beneath him mirrored the steady beat of his heart, and he let it guide him. He carried his staff lightly, tapping it gently against the ground with each step. The sound was soft, almost musical, echoing faintly across the empty fields. He paused to watch a small hare move cautiously through the grass, its nose twitching as it sniffed the cool air. Hercules crouched slightly, lowering his body, and simply watched. Its careful movement reminded him of the fox in the grove, quiet and deliberate, choosing each step with care. The river was nearer now, its surface silver in the early light. Hercules knelt at the edge, letting his fingertips brush the water. It was cool and smooth, slipping easily between his fingers, carrying with it tiny leaves and petals. He traced patterns in the water, watching how it curved around small stones, never forcing, always flowing. He leaned closer, listening to its murmur, feeling its rhythm in his chest. Even the strongest currents moved gently. If you watch and follow, he thought. He reached into the shallow water and lifted a smooth stone, turning it slowly in his hands. Its weight was comforting, steady, and he felt the resistance press lightly against his palms. He set it back carefully, aligning it with others along the riverbank. He worked quietly, arranging stones in lines and clusters, each placement deliberate, testing balance, weight, and position. Sweat began to bead along his brow, the movement warm and satisfying, yet never hurried or forced. Hercules rose and walked along the river's edge, noticing the subtle changes in its flow. Small ripples shifted around protruding rocks, and sunlight caught the surface in flickering patterns. He reached down to touch the water again, letting it run over his wrists and along the backs of his hands. The cool sensation was soothing, connecting him to the river and the earth beneath. He felt each pulse in his arms, each shift in his legs, and thought, strength is measured not by how fast I move, but by how carefully I place myself within the world. A breeze rustled the leaves along the riverbank, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and damp moss. Hercules inhaled deeply, savoring the mixture, feeling the way it pressed softly against his lungs and brushed across his face. The small birds flitting along the water's edge chirped softly, their tiny movements deliberate and careful. He crouched to watch them, noting how they adjusted to the water's flow, shifting with the current, never in a rush. Everything has its pace, he thought. Even I can move with it if I listen. He found a slightly larger stone near the bank, irregular and heavy. Hercules lifted it carefully, adjusting his grip, feeling the weight distribute evenly through his arms and shoulders. He carried it a few steps, then set it down with careful precision, testing balance and placement. A small ripple spread through the water, carrying a leaf downstream, and he smiled at the quiet satisfaction of the task. He He thought of the cave, the grove, the fox, and the hawk. All had shown him aspects of careful strength, of patience, of observation. And now the river adds its lesson, he thought. The sun climbed higher, warming his skin and illuminating the water in soft, shifting patterns. Hercules knelt by a shallow pool where the current slowed, dipping his hands and letting the flow slip between his fingers. He traced the outline of a small stone beneath the surface, feeling its smoothness against his palms. The river seemed alive, moving with gentle insistence, teaching him how to carry effort without forcing it, how to align himself with the world rather than dominate it. He leaned back on his heels, letting his staff rest lightly across his knees, and watched the light shift across the water. Tiny insects skimmed the surface, each movement purposeful, each ripple deliberate. He traced the paths they made with his eyes, noticing how each change in current affected them. Observation is strength, he thought. Awareness is strength. Careful attention is more powerful than haste or force. Heracles stood slowly, walking along the edge of the river, stepping carefully over wet stones and mossy patches. The rhythm of his movements matched the flow of the water, deliberate and steady. He knelt again at a cluster of small stones, arranging them in gentle lines along the bank, adjusting their position until they balanced perfectly. Each placement felt like a conversation with the earth, a dialogue of weight, texture, and patience. A small ripple spread from his hands to the river, carrying a petal downstream. He followed it with his gaze until it disappeared beyond the bend. The quiet persistence of the water reminded him of all the paths he had walked, the choices he had made, and the effort he had placed carefully in each moment. Even small actions matter, he thought. Even small touches leave ripples behind. Heracles walked deeper along the river, noticing a hollow where water pooled quietly, almost still. He knelt, pressing both palms into the cool surface, letting the weight of his body press lightly against the flow. The water resisted slightly, then accepted him, shifting and bending naturally around his hands. He traced patterns with his fingers, feeling the subtle force of the current, the texture of the stones beneath. Strength is not only in my arms, he thought. It is in my ability to move with care, to feel, to respond. By midday, he found a small rise overlooking the river. He climbed it slowly, feeling the firmness of the soil beneath his feet, the small stones pressing against his soles. From this vantage, he could see the river winding through the valley, its surface flickering with sunlight. He leaned on his staff, breathing steadily, feeling the warmth of the sun on his shoulders and the gentle pull of the wind across his face. The world seemed vast, yet every detail mattered. Every small element part of a larger rhythm he could join if he moved carefully. He knelt at the edge of the rise, pressing a hand against a stone to steady himself. The texture was rough, uneven, but steady. He lifted another stone nearby, adjusting his balance as he carried it to the edge of the overlook. He set it down carefully, watching how it shifted slightly with the slope, settling into the earth naturally. Everything can be moved with patience, he thought. Everything can find its place if I am steady and deliberate. Heracles sat for a long while, resting against a larger stone, watching the river below. The water carried petals, leaves, and tiny sticks downstream, each motion subtle, deliberate, and continuous. He followed their movement with his eyes, noticing the way the current adapted, bending around obstacles without forcing them aside. He pressed his hand lightly against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and thought, I carry more than stones. I carry attention, care, and understanding. That is the measure of true strength. The sun began to descend toward the hills, casting long shadows across the valley. Fireflies began to blink faintly along the riverbank, small points of light that drifted gently through the evening air. Heracles watched them, tracing their motion with his gaze, feeling their calm, deliberate presence as a reflection of his own journey. All creatures move with a rhythm, he thought. Even I can follow it if I listen and observe. By twilight, Heracles returned to the riverbank, kneeling once more to dip his hands in the water. He let it run slowly through his fingers, feeling the coolness carry the heat of the day away. He watched the ripples spread and fade, leaving the water calm and steady once more. He breathed in the scents of earth, grass, and river, feeling them settle into his senses. He rose slowly, feeling the gentle weight of the day in his muscles and bones. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat. The lessons of the river, the stones, and the flowing water had settled into him, quiet and steady, as if part of his very being. He carried them with him as he walked back toward the hills, each step deliberate, each motion measured, each breath calm and steady. The stars began to appear above, faint points of silver and pale gold scattered across the darkening sky. Hercules looked up, tracing the constellations with his eyes, imagining the long journeys they had made across the heavens. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest once more, feeling the pulse of life, strength, and awareness within him. I move with care. I carry strength with thought. I follow the rhythm of the world, and it carries me further than force ever could. The night was quiet, filled only with the soft sound of the river, the distant rustle of leaves, and the gentle hum of life in the fields. Hercules walked steadily, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each sound deliberate, each motion calm. He felt the weight of his own strength, measured and contained, carrying him forward into the next day, the next challenge, and the next lesson waiting quietly along the path. Hercules rose with the soft light of dawn, the world wrapped in a gentle haze. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and distant wildflowers. He adjusted his staff, feeling its familiar weight against his hand, and began walking toward the hill that rose beyond the river's curve. The path was uneven, scattered with stones and roots, and each step demanded careful attention. The wind whispered through the grass, bending the stalks and carrying the faint rustle of leaves. Hercules paused, letting the breeze brush across his face. He closed his eyes for a moment, sensing the rhythm in the movement of the air. The hill seemed alive with it, as if the wind carried the quiet pulse of the earth beneath. Even the air has a rhythm, he thought. I must learn to move with it, not against it. He began his ascent slowly, pressing his bare feet against the soil, feeling the subtle rise and fall beneath him. Each step required balance and awareness, and he let the staff guide him, tapping lightly against the ground to mark his rhythm. He noticed the small stones scattered along the path, the roughness of their surfaces beneath his hands, the faint warmth retained from the rising sun. Halfway up the hill, he paused to observe a cluster of wildflowers growing between the rocks. Their petals trembled slightly in the breeze, delicate and alive. Hercules crouched to study them, tracing a finger along the curve of a petal, noting the fine veins that ran through it. The flowers seemed fragile, yet they persisted, holding steady against the wind. He smiled softly, thinking of the fox, the hare, and the river stones. Even the smallest life endures when it moves with care. He continued upward, feeling the wind strengthen as he rose. It tugged gently at his hair and clothes, urging him to pause and lean into it, to find balance against its invisible force. He pressed his staff firmly into the ground and let the breeze guide his stance. Strength is not only in holding firm, but in yielding when needed, he thought. It is knowing when to bend, when to lean, when to step lightly. At the crest of the hill, Hercules found a flat stone, smooth and warm from the sun. He knelt and pressed both hands against it, feeling its solid presence beneath his palms. The wind swept past him, carrying the faint scent of distant trees, flowers, and the river far below. He let it brush across his face, over his shoulders, filling his lungs with its cool freshness. He leaned back slightly, feeling the stone beneath him, the earth firm and steady. The world stretched wide, the river winding like silver thread through the valley, the olive groves standing in quiet clusters, and the distant hills fading into soft blue shadows. Hercules closed his eyes, sensing the pulse of the wind, the slow drift of the clouds, the quiet life moving through the fields below. A small bird landed nearby, wings fluttering as it adjusted to the breeze. Hercules watched it carefully, noting how it shifted weight from foot to foot, how it balanced against the gusts, how it sang quietly, undisturbed. He mirrored its careful movements, shifting his weight slightly, adjusting his stance, feeling the balance in his legs and the steadying support of his staff. Even in small things, there is strength and precision, he thought. Even in quiet moments, lessons await. He rose slowly and began to walk along the ridge of the hill, stepping carefully on uneven stones. The wind brushed across him, tugging gently, urging patience and awareness. He let it guide his motion, feeling the subtle give of the earth beneath each footfall. He passed a small cluster of moss-covered stones, running his fingers along their surfaces, noting the roughness, the uneven edges, the coolness retained from the night. Hercules paused to lift one of the stones, testing its weight, feeling how it balanced against his palms. He carried it a short distance and placed it gently near the others, aligning it with care. The act was simple, yet deliberate, each movement a meditation in patience and attention. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but it felt steady, purposeful, a companion to the quiet rhythm of the hill and the wind. The sun climbed higher, spilling light across the valley in warm, golden rays. Heracles knelt beside a small patch of grass, pressing his hands into the soil. He felt its firmness, the subtle give beneath his palms, the faint vibration of life moving quietly beneath the surface. He lifted small clumps of earth, adjusted stones, and smoothed the ground with careful motions. Each act was deliberate, measured, a quiet reflection of his growing understanding of strength, patience, and balance. A sudden rustle among the grass caught his attention. A hare emerged, moving cautiously, its nose twitching as it sniffed the wind. Heracles crouched low, remaining still, observing. The hare shifted slightly, paused, and continued its careful path through the grass. He felt a quiet kinship with the creature, noticing how both of them moved with awareness, each step deliberate, each movement chosen with care. He walked along the ridge, staff tapping lightly against the stones. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint murmur of the river, the soft scent of wildflowers, and the coolness of the morning. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the world fill his senses. The pulse of the earth, the flow of the river, the sway of the trees, all of it seemed connected, and he felt his own strength harmonize with it. Even the wind teaches if I watch and listen, he thought. At a small rise near the top of the hill, he found a hollow where stones had formed a natural seat. He knelt and traced his fingers across them, noticing the rough edges, the smooth surfaces, and the slight warmth retained from the sun. He lifted a few carefully, adjusting their placement, feeling the subtle shift in weight through his arms and shoulders. Each stone seemed to fit perfectly in its new spot, a quiet testament to patience and observation. The breeze grew stronger, carrying the faint scent of earth and distant forests. Heracles pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and leaned into the wind, letting it guide his stance. Strength is measured not only in lifting and carrying, he thought. It is in yielding, in observing, in moving with care and understanding. He stood for a long while, watching the valley below. The river shimmered faintly, the olive trees cast long shadows, and the distant hills glowed softly in the morning light. Tiny insects moved across the stones and grass, each step deliberate, each motion purposeful. He bent slightly to observe them, tracing the careful path of a small beetle climbing a leaf, the slow drift of a butterfly on the breeze. Even the smallest actions matter, he thought. Even the quietest moments carry meaning. Heracles leaned back against a larger stone, staff across his knees, closing his eyes. He felt the warmth of the sun, cool touch of the wind, the steady pulse of the earth beneath him. He imagined the fox, the river, the cave, and now the hill, each place teaching him a different aspect of strength, patience, and awareness. He pressed his palms together and rested his forehead against them, letting the quiet understanding settle deep within him. The day advanced, the sun climbing higher, and Heracles continued along the ridge, stepping carefully over stones and through patches of tall grass. Each motion was deliberate, each breath measured. He paused to lift a stone or adjust a fallen branch, testing balance, observing resistance, and learning the subtle language of the land beneath his feet. By afternoon, he found a small cluster of wildflowers in full bloom along the ridge. He crouched to observe them, tracing a finger across a petal, noting its fine veins and delicate edges. The flowers swayed gently in the wind, persistent and steady. He smiled softly, thinking of the lessons carried by the fox, the hare, the river stones, and the cave. Patience, care, and attention carry more than force ever could, he thought. The wind grew softer as evening approached, carrying the faint scent of distant rivers and forests. Heracles walked slowly back down the hill, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each step deliberate and steady. The shadows lengthened, the colors of the valley deepened, and the quiet pulse of life surrounded him. By the time he reached the base, the stars began to appear faintly in the sky. He paused, looking back toward the hill, tracing the paths he had walked, the stones he had moved, the wind that had guided him. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat. "I carry more than strength," he whispered. "I carry patience, observation, and care. That is the measure of true power." The night settled around him, calm and quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of rustling leaves, distant water, and the faint hum of nocturnal life. Hercules walked steadily home, each step measured, each motion deliberate, each breath calm and even. He carried the lessons of the hill, the wind, and the earth with him, ready for the challenges yet to come, knowing that strength guided by care would lead him further than force alone ever could. Hercules rose to the soft light of dawn, the sky pale and quiet, a gentle promise of a new day. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine needles. He adjusted his staff in his hands and walked toward the forest that lay beyond the hills. The path was uneven, scattered with roots and fallen branches, and each step required careful attention. The ground beneath his feet felt alive, subtly shifting under his weight, guiding him forward. The forest welcomed him with soft sounds, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, the distant call of a bird, and the quiet murmur of a hidden stream. Hercules stepped carefully, noting how the earth yielded slightly beneath each footfall, how the fallen leaves cushioned his steps, and how the smell of moss and wet soil deepened with every pace. He pressed the staff lightly against the ground, feeling the subtle vibrations beneath him, sensing the rhythm of life in the forest. He paused beside a cluster of ferns, bending to brush his fingers over the delicate fronds. They trembled softly under his touch, yet did not break. He smiled, marveling at the gentle strength held in their resilience. Even the smallest life holds power in its own way, he thought. Careful attention reveals what might be unseen at first glance. Moving deeper, the forest grew quieter, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Shafts of sunlight broke through the canopy, painting golden patterns on the moss-covered stones and fallen logs. Hercules knelt to study one of the stones, pressing his palms against it, feeling its cool, rough surface. He lifted it carefully, adjusted its position to fill a small gap among the other stones, and placed it down with deliberate care. The act was quiet, almost meditative, the rhythm of movement steady and controlled. A gentle rustling among the branches caught his attention. A small fox stepped into view, its eyes alert, ears twitching at the slightest sound. Hercules froze, lowering himself slightly, and watched the animal with quiet curiosity. The fox sniffed the air, then moved slowly, carefully, over the forest floor. He followed its movement with his eyes, noting how it adjusted each step, how it balanced its body in harmony with the uneven terrain. There is grace in deliberate motion, he thought. Even in stillness, strength is present. He continued along the winding path, stepping over roots and small streams, feeling the slight give of the earth beneath his feet. Each motion was deliberate, measured, and intentional. He noticed a small pool of water where sunlight reflected off the surface, and he knelt to dip his fingers into it. The cool liquid flowed around his hands, carrying tiny leaves and fragments of moss downstream. He traced patterns with his fingers, feeling the subtle resistance of the water and the smoothness of the stones beneath. The forest seemed to respond to his presence, the wind shifting gently, the leaves whispering in soft tones. Hercules moved slowly, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each sound deliberate. He lifted a fallen branch and placed it across a shallow stream to create a bridge for small creatures, adjusting it with care so it balanced naturally. He marveled at the simple act, noting the quiet harmony created by mindful effort. A faint chirping drew his attention to a cluster of birds perched on low branches. He crouched slightly, observing them as they moved with careful precision, balancing along the branches, flitting from one to another with effortless grace. He mirrored their careful steps as he moved along the path, shifting his weight gently, adjusting his stance, and letting the staff guide his balance. Strength is not only in carrying or lifting, he thought. It is in observing, in moving with care, and in responding to the world around me. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled light across the forest floor. Hercules paused at a moss-covered stone, pressing his hands against its surface. He lifted it slowly, feeling the weight distribute evenly through his arms and legs, and placed it carefully near the roots of a tree. The subtle shift of the stone in its new position pleased him, a quiet confirmation of patience and precision. Further along the path, he discovered a hollow where a small stream trickled gently over smooth stones. He knelt beside it, letting the cool water flow over his hands and arms, feeling the gentle current. He traced the stones beneath, adjusting a few with care, arranging them to create small patterns in harmony with the flow. The act was quiet, almost ceremonial, the rhythm of movement deliberate and reflective. Even small touches create change, he thought. Every motion carries a ripple. He leaned back against a large tree trunk, feeling its solidity and warmth through the rough bark. The wind whispered through the leaves above, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Hercules pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and let his mind wander briefly over the lessons of the fox, the river, the cave, and the hill. Each place had taught him something about strength, patience, and observation, and now the forest added its quiet voice. A sudden movement in the underbrush caught his eye. A deer emerged, cautious and graceful, its large eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight. Heracles lowered himself, remaining still, and watched as the animal moved with careful precision, stepping lightly over roots and stones. He felt a kinship with its measured motion, a quiet understanding that strength and grace often coexist in patience and attentiveness. The forest deepened, shadows lengthening as afternoon approached. Heracles continued along the path, staff tapping lightly, each step deliberate. He paused occasionally to adjust a stone, move a fallen branch, or observe a small insect navigating the mossy floor. Each action was purposeful, each breath steady, each motion guided by awareness. Near a bend in the path, he found a small clearing bathed in soft sunlight. Wildflowers grew among the stones, their petals bright against the muted greens and browns of the forest. Heracles knelt, pressing his hands into the soil, feeling the subtle resistance beneath his fingers. He arranged a few small stones among the flowers, balancing them carefully to create gentle patterns in harmony with the natural surroundings. The simple act was satisfying, a reflection of his growing understanding of mindful strength. A breeze drifted through the clearing, carrying the faint murmur of the distant river, the soft rustle of leaves, and the subtle fragrance of wildflowers. Heracles closed his eyes briefly, letting the wind brush across his face and shoulders, feeling the rhythm of the forest, the pulse of life beneath his feet, and the steady beat of his heart. Strength is in care, in observation, in patience, he thought. It is in knowing when to move and when to remain still. He rose slowly and continued along the forest path, noting the subtle changes in light and shadow, the faint sounds of distant creatures, and the texture of the earth beneath his feet. Each step was deliberate, each movement measured. He paused at a cluster of ferns and moss-covered stones, adjusting a few stones to balance naturally with the terrain, feeling the gentle resistance in his muscles as he worked. As evening approached, the forest began to glow with soft golden light. The air cooled, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. Heracles walked steadily, staff tapping lightly, each sound deliberate, each motion calm. He paused beside a small stream, letting the cool water flow over his hands, tracing patterns with his fingers and observing the gentle currents around the stones. He leaned back against a tree trunk, feeling the steady support beneath him. The forest was quiet now, filled only with the soft whisper of leaves, the distant murmur of the river, and the faint hum of nocturnal life awakening. Heracles pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat, the steady pulse of life and strength within him. I carry more than strength, he thought. I carry patience, awareness, and care. I move with the rhythm of the world, and it carries me further than force ever could. He rose, stepping carefully along the forest path as the stars began to appear above, scattered across the darkening sky. Each step was deliberate, each breath calm, each motion measured. The forest seemed to breathe with him, the whispering leaves echoing his careful rhythm. By nightfall, he reached the edge of the forest, pausing to look back at the dense trees and shadowed paths. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. The forest has taught me patience, balance, and quiet strength, he thought. It has shown me the power in careful movement and deliberate action. The stars glimmered faintly above the hills, and Heracles walked steadily toward home, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each motion deliberate, each step measured. The lessons of the forest, the hill, the river, the cave, and the fields were now carried within him, woven into the rhythm of his body and the steady pulse of his heart. Hercules awoke to the soft glow of morning, the sky painted in delicate shades of peach and pale blue. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of stone and wildflowers from the hills beyond the forest. He rose slowly, pressing his palms lightly to the earth before standing, feeling the firmness of the ground beneath his feet. His staff rested comfortably in his hand, its familiar weight steadying him as he prepared to follow the winding path toward the mountains he had glimpsed in the distance. The path was narrow and uneven, strewn with small stones and patches of grass, climbing gradually upward. Each step demanded attention, and Heracles felt the subtle pull of his muscles as he adjusted his weight. He pressed the staff into the earth lightly, tapping it rhythmically as he moved. The sound echoed faintly against the rocks and soft earth, a companion to the quiet rhythm of his own breathing. He paused to observe the rising sun, its golden light spilling across the hills and illuminating the wildflowers that grew along the path. Tiny insects flitted among the blooms, their wings catching the sunlight and casting faint shadows on the ground. Heracles crouched slightly, tracing a finger along the curve of a petal and feeling the gentle texture. Even the smallest life moves with purpose, he thought. Even the quietest presence carries meaning. The path grew steeper, and he adjusted his steps carefully, shifting his weight deliberately with each movement. The wind whispered softly through the grasses and sparse trees, tugging gently at his hair and clothing. He pressed the staff firmly, leaning into the slight resistance of the incline. Strength is not only in lifting and carrying, he thought. It is in knowing how to place yourself, how to adjust, how to move steadily without rushing. A small cluster of rocks jutted from the path, and Heracles knelt to examine them. He traced their rough surfaces with his fingers, noting the way the sunlight glimmered off small cracks and crevices. He lifted a few carefully, testing their weight and balance, and arranged them to form a gentle pattern that complemented the slope of the hill. The simple act grounded him, connecting his movement to the earth beneath and the larger rhythm of the mountain. Further along, a faint trickle of water caught his attention. He followed the sound to a narrow stream winding down the hillside. The water was cool and clear, gliding smoothly over the stones. Heracles knelt to dip his hands into it, feeling the gentle flow slip between his fingers and brush against his palms. He traced the path of small pebbles beneath the surface, adjusting a few to create a subtle pattern in harmony with the water's movement. Even the smallest adjustments can guide the flow, he thought. Even quiet effort carries weight. A sudden movement in the rocks above drew his gaze. A mountain goat leapt gracefully from one ledge to another, its hooves striking lightly against stone. Heracles remained still, observing the careful precision of its motion. Each jump, each landing, was deliberate, controlled, and perfectly balanced. He mirrored its careful adjustment in his own stance, feeling the rhythm in his legs and the subtle tension in his arms. Strength and balance exist together, he thought. Force alone cannot guide movement with such grace. The sun climbed higher, spilling warm light across the hillside. Heracles moved steadily, staff tapping lightly, each step measured. He paused occasionally to adjust a stone, balance a loose branch, or smooth the earth beneath his feet. Each motion was deliberate, each breath steady. The mountain path required patience and awareness, and he welcomed the quiet challenge. He reached a small plateau, where the path widened slightly and wildflowers grew amongst scattered stones. Heracles knelt and pressed his palms into the earth, feeling the firmness beneath and the gentle give of soil softened by morning dew. He arranged a few stones along the edge of a small patch of flowers, balancing them carefully. The act was quiet and meditative, a reflection of the lessons carried from the cave, the river, the hill, and the forest. Careful placement is strength, he thought. Observation is power. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of distant forests and distant rivers. Heracles leaned on his staff, feeling the subtle vibration of the ground beneath him, sensing the rhythm of life in the hillside. The plateau stretched wide, offering a view of the valleys below, the river winding like silver thread, the forest standing quietly in clusters, and the hills fading softly into the distance. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Strength grows when it is guided by care, he thought. Patience shapes power, and awareness shapes action. He continued along the mountain path, stepping carefully over loose stones and patches of grass. The incline demanded attention, and he adjusted his weight constantly, feeling the subtle resistance in his legs and the supportive grounding of his feet. He noticed the texture of the earth beneath, the roughness of stones, the gentle sway of grasses in the wind, and the way each movement affected his balance. Every step is a choice, he thought. Every motion carries consequences. A small cave appeared on the side of the mountain, its entrance shadowed and cool. Hercules paused, pressing a hand against the stone to steady himself. He peered inside, observing the quiet darkness. The faint drip of water echoed softly, and the stone walls felt solid under his touch. He traced a finger along the rough surface, noticing the subtle cracks and textures. Even in shadow, there is guidance, he thought. Even in stillness, there is strength. He stepped inside, feeling the cool air brush against his skin. The floor was uneven, scattered with small stones and patches of moss. Hercules knelt, pressing his hands against the ground, lifting a few stones, adjusting their placement carefully. The act was deliberate, quiet, and grounding, connecting him to the earth beneath and the rhythm of the mountain. He let his mind wander over the lessons carried from the river, the forest, and the hill. Each place teaches something new, he thought. Strength is more than muscle. It is balance, awareness, and care. Hours passed in the quiet of the cave, Hercules moving stones, observing shadows, and feeling the subtle shifts in air and stone. The wind whispered through the entrance, carrying faint scents of pine and earth, mingling with the warmth of the sun that had penetrated the opening. He pressed his palms together briefly, resting his forehead against them, feeling the steady pulse of his heart. Every act, every motion, carries weight and meaning, he thought. Patience guides power, and care shapes strength. By late afternoon, he stepped out of the cave, the sun casting long shadows across the mountainside. He paused at the threshold, looking down at the valleys below, tracing the winding river, the scattered forests, and the distant hills. Each element seemed alive with quiet movement, a subtle rhythm guiding the world around him. Hercules adjusted his staff, feeling the familiar weight, and began descending the path carefully, each step deliberate, each motion measured. A gentle breeze swept past, carrying the faint scent of flowers, pine, and earth. Hercules pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. He smiled softly, thinking of the fox, the hare, the river stones, the forest, the hill, and now the mountain. Each place has taught me patience, observation, and careful movement, he thought. Each lesson has shaped the rhythm of my strength. As evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of purple and gold, the mountains casting long shadows over the valleys below. Hercules moved steadily along the winding path, staff tapping lightly against the stones, each sound deliberate. He paused occasionally to lift a small stone, adjust a branch, or balance himself against the slope. Each action carried care, each motion carried intention, each breath remained calm and steady. By twilight, he reached the base of the mountains, the valleys stretching wide around him. The stars began to appear faintly in the sky, scattered across the darkening canvas above. Hercules pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Strength is not only in the arms and legs, he thought. It is in the mind, the heart, and the care with which I move through the world. He walked steadily toward a gentle slope leading to the river, staff tapping lightly, each step deliberate, each motion measured. The quiet lessons of the mountain, the forest, the hill, the river, and the cave moved with him, woven into the rhythm of his body and the steady pulse of his heart. The night was calm, filled only with the soft rustle of leaves, the faint murmur of distant water, and the quiet hum of nocturnal life awakening around him. Hercules pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the connection between mind, body, and the world around him. I carry patience, awareness, and care, he thought. I move with the rhythm of the world, and that rhythm carries me further than force alone ever could. The stars grew brighter, the night settled quietly over the mountains and valleys, and Hercules continued steadily along the gentle slope toward home. Each step, each motion, and each breath reflected the lessons of the day. Strength, tempered with care, awareness, and patience, guided him forward into the challenges and journeys yet to come. Hercules rose to a pale, quiet dawn, the sky painted in muted shades of rose and gold. The air was cool and carried the scent of damp earth from the mountain's base. He adjusted his staff and began walking toward the valley that stretched beyond the hills. Each step required care, as the path was scattered with stones of varying sizes, uneven patches of soil, and the occasional exposed root. He pressed the staff lightly against the ground, letting its weight guide his movements and steady his balance. The valley opened before him, wide and still, filled with the faint murmur of a distant stream and the gentle rustling of leaves in a soft morning breeze. Hercules stepped carefully among the stones, noting their textures and weight beneath his hands as he occasionally shifted or lifted them to test balance and placement. Every stone has its place, he thought. Every motion carries intention and consequence. He reached a cluster of larger rocks, each one smooth and cool from the morning dew. Hercules knelt and ran his fingers along their surfaces, noting subtle cracks and ridges. He lifted a few carefully, placing them strategically to form gentle patterns that complemented the natural arrangement of the valley floor. The act was deliberate, meditative, and grounding, a quiet exercise in observation and patience. The sunlight began to filter through a thin layer of mist that hung over the valley, painting the stones and grass in soft, golden hues. Hercules inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of wet earth and wildflowers, letting the calm rhythm of the morning fill his senses. He traced the path of a small stream with his eyes, watching how it curved gently around stones, carrying tiny leaves downstream. Even water moves with purpose, he thought. Even gentle flow can shape the world around it. A sudden movement above drew his gaze to a hawk circling gracefully overhead. Its wings spread wide, gliding effortlessly on the rising currents of air. Hercules watched, noting the subtle shifts in its motion, the careful adjustments of its wings, the balance maintained even in gusts of wind. He adjusted his own stance as he observed, letting the awareness of its deliberate motion guide his steps along the uneven valley floor. Strength exists in harmony, he thought. Even the mightiest force yields when guided with care. He continued along the valley, stepping lightly over small stones, feeling the slight give of the soil beneath his feet. He paused beside a cluster of moss-covered rocks, pressing his palms against them, lifting a few with careful precision and aligning them gently. The motion was quiet but deliberate, reinforcing his growing understanding that strength was more than raw power. It was awareness, patience, and attentiveness. The stream grew nearer, and Hercules knelt beside it to dip his hands in the cool, clear water. It ran smoothly over his palms, carrying small pebbles and fallen leaves downstream. He traced the contours of the stones beneath the water, adjusting their placement slightly to form patterns that harmonized with the flow. The act was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it grounded him, connecting his movements with the gentle pulse of the valley. Even small touches can shape the world, he thought. Even quiet actions carry weight. A soft breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp moss. Hercules leaned on his staff, feeling the vibration of the ground beneath him, sensing the rhythm of life in the valley. He observed a small fox emerging cautiously from the underbrush, its steps measured, each motion deliberate. He mirrored its careful movements, adjusting his weight, letting the staff guide his balance. Awareness is strength, he thought. Observation is power. The sunlight shifted as the day advanced, casting gentle shadows across the valley floor. Hercules walked steadily, stepping over uneven stones, adjusting his stance to maintain balance, and occasionally pausing to rearrange small rocks or smooth the earth beneath his feet. Each motion was intentional, deliberate, and grounded, a quiet reflection of the lessons he had carried from the river, the forest, the hill, and the mountain path. He paused at a small rise in the valley, where the stones seemed to echo faintly under his hands and feet. Hercules knelt, pressing his palms against the cool surface of a large stone, feeling its solid presence beneath. He lifted it carefully, testing its weight and balance, and placed it gently near the edge of the rise. The subtle echo of the stone settling filled the quiet air, a gentle reminder that even small actions could resonate far beyond their immediate space. Everything carries consequences, he thought. Every action leaves its mark. A rustle in the underbrush drew his attention to a small herd of deer grazing quietly. Hercules lowered himself slightly, remaining still, and observed their measured movements. Each step was careful, each motion deliberate. He traced their path with his eyes, noting how they adjusted to the terrain, how they moved with precision and awareness. He He felt a kinship with their cautious grace, understanding that true strength lay in balance and care as much as in force. The valley grew warmer as midday approached, sunlight pouring through gaps in the sparse trees. Heracles continued along the winding path, stepping carefully, feeling the textures of earth and stone beneath his hands and feet. He paused beside a shallow pool formed by the stream, kneeling to dip his hands in the cool water. The flow was gentle, slipping between his fingers, carrying tiny leaves downstream. He traced the stones beneath the surface, adjusting a few slightly, observing how even subtle changes influenced the current. He rose slowly, leaning on his staff, feeling the pulse of his heartbeat and the subtle vibration of the valley floor beneath his feet. The wide expanse of the valley stretched before him, filled with stones, grass, water, and quiet life. Birds flitted among the trees, insects moved along the ground, and the distant murmur of the stream echoed softly through the air. Heracles pressed a hand lightly to his chest, sensing the steady rhythm of life and strength within him. Strength is measured not only in motion or force, he thought. It is in awareness, patience, and careful action. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grasses, carrying the faint scent of pine and wildflowers from the surrounding hills. Heracles walked slowly, letting each step follow the rhythm of the land. He adjusted his weight deliberately, feeling the slight pull of the incline, the firmness of the earth beneath, and the subtle give of moss-covered stones. Each movement was intentional, each breath measured, each motion guided by awareness. Near the center of the valley, he found a large stone with a flat surface, warm from the sun. He knelt beside it, pressing his palms lightly, tracing its rough texture and feeling the subtle vibrations as he shifted his weight. He lifted a few smaller stones, arranging them carefully along the edge, creating a quiet pattern that seemed to harmonize with the flow of the stream and the contours of the valley. The act was meditative, grounding, and deliberate, reinforcing the lessons he had absorbed from every place he had walked. As afternoon approached, the sun cast long shadows across the valley floor. Heracles paused to observe the soft movement of leaves, the gentle ripple of the stream, and the subtle shifts of light and shadow among the stones. Each detail carried significance. Each movement offered insight. He pressed his hands together, resting his forehead briefly against them, feeling the pulse of life, strength, and awareness within himself. Every act, every choice, every step carries weight, he thought. Every motion shapes the world and my path through it. He continued steadily, following the winding path of the valley. Small animals moved quietly, birds chirped softly, and the stream's gentle murmur accompanied his steps. Heracles adjusted stones along the edge of the water, balanced fallen branches, and smoothed the earth beneath his feet. Each action was deliberate, measured, and purposeful, a reflection of his growing understanding that true strength was guided by care and observation. By evening, the sky glowed with soft shades of violet and gold, and stars began to appear faintly above the valley. Heracles paused, leaning on his staff, pressing a hand lightly to his chest. The stream reflected the first points of starlight, and the valley seemed to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. Strength guided by care moves further than force alone, he thought. Patience and awareness shape every path, every choice, every moment. He walked steadily toward the river beyond the valley, staff tapping lightly against the ground, each step deliberate, each motion measured. The quiet lessons of the mountain, forest, hill, river, and now the valley were carried within him, woven into the rhythm of his body and the steady pulse of his heart. The night was calm, filled only with the soft whisper of leaves, the faint murmur of water, and the quiet hum of life awakening in the darkness. Heracles pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the connection between mind, body, and the world around him. I carry patience, awareness, and care, he thought. I move with the rhythm of the world, and that rhythm carries me further than force ever could. Heracles rose slowly as the first tendrils of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and gold. The valley behind him had grown quiet under the gentle morning light, and before him stretched a grove filled with trees whose leaves shimmered faintly like silver in the rising sun. The air carried the faint scent of dew, pine, and distant wildflowers, mingling in a gentle, calming perfume. He adjusted his staff, feeling its familiar weight in his hand, and stepped forward toward the grove. The ground was soft with moss and fallen leaves, cushioning each step. Hercules pressed the staff lightly against the earth to steady himself, feeling the subtle give beneath the soles of his feet. The grove seemed alive with quiet energy, the soft hum of insects, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, and the faint trickle of a hidden stream weaving through the trees. He moved slowly, allowing each step to carry him deliberately, observing the textures of the ground and the pattern of sunlight filtering through the branches. He paused beside a cluster of silver-leaf saplings, brushing his hand along their smooth, delicate bark. The leaves trembled slightly under his touch, catching the sunlight in tiny flashes that mirrored the quiet shimmer of morning dew. He crouched to examine the roots, tracing their gentle curves and noting the strength and resilience hidden beneath the surface. Even delicate things carry power, he thought. Careful observation reveals hidden strength. As he continued, Heracles noticed a small fox weaving silently between the trees. Its fur gleamed faintly in the sunlight, and it moved with careful, deliberate steps. He slowed his pace, watching its subtle adjustments to the uneven ground and the low-hanging branches. He mimicked its careful movement, adjusting his weight and letting the staff guide his balance. Strength is harmony, he thought. Force alone cannot match awareness. A soft rustling drew his attention to a cluster of birds nesting high among the branches. Their wings flitted gently, and their calls were soft and melodic. Heracles crouched low to observe, noting the precision with which they moved along the branches. Each motion was deliberate, controlled, and graceful. He mirrored this deliberate care in his own movements, stepping lightly over roots and balancing stones along the path. Balance and attentiveness shape true power, he reflected. Even the smallest gestures have meaning. The grove opened to a sunlit clearing where a small stream traced a silver ribbon across the moss-covered stones. Heracles knelt beside it, letting the cool water flow over his hands. He traced the smooth stones beneath the surface, shifting a few slightly to form patterns that complemented the gentle current. The motion was subtle, yet grounding, connecting him with the rhythm of life flowing through the grove. Even subtle actions ripple outward, he thought. Even quiet care shapes the world. The sun climbed higher, and the air filled with the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Heracles pressed his palms to a large flat stone near the stream, feeling its firmness and coolness. He lifted a smaller stone beside it, adjusting its placement carefully, letting his awareness guide each movement. The gentle weight in his arms was familiar, grounding him in the rhythm of deliberate effort. Each motion was precise, measured, and purposeful, a reflection of his growing understanding that true strength is informed by patience and care. As he followed the winding path deeper into the groove, he paused to observe a small deer drinking at the stream's edge. Its movements were careful, each step placed with mindfulness and balance. Heracles crouched to the ground, adjusting his stance and breathing slowly to mirror its deliberate rhythm. He watched the subtle shifts of its weight, the gentle press of hooves on soft moss, and the small movements of its ears attuned to distant sounds. Even a quiet presence carries strength, he thought. Even careful observation teaches lessons beyond force. A breeze rustled the silver leaves above him, carrying the faint scent of flowers and distant earth. Heracles leaned on his staff, feeling the subtle vibration of the ground beneath him. The grove seemed to breathe with him, every leaf, stone, and branch attuned to a quiet, shared rhythm. He traced a hand along a moss-covered rock, feeling its roughness and warmth from the rising sun. Each sensation grounded him further, deepening his awareness of the subtle forces around him. He paused to rearrange a few stones along the stream's edge, placing them carefully to guide the flow of water over smoother surfaces. The act was deliberate and quiet, a reflection of the lessons carried from the valley, the mountain, the forest, and the hill. Each adjustment taught him more about balance, careful movement, and the gentle shaping of the world. Even the smallest changes can influence the larger pattern, he reflected. The sunlight shifted as the day advanced, casting golden patterns across the mossy floor. Heracles noticed a small bird hopping between the roots of a tree, adjusting its steps to maintain balance. He mirrored its movement subtly, shifting his weight and letting his arms guide his balance, staff tapping lightly against the ground. The grove's quiet energy guided him, a subtle reminder that strength and attentiveness grow hand in hand. Near the center of the grove, a hollow formed naturally between three ancient trees, their trunks thick and steady. Heracles knelt to examine the space, pressing his hands against the roots and the earth between them. He shifted a few stones carefully to form a gentle pattern, mindful of the delicate balance between earth, stone, and the tree's sprawling roots. The action required patience, careful attention, and awareness of subtle shifts in weight and texture. Strength guided by care moves farther than force alone, he thought. A gentle rustling drew his attention to the edge of the clearing. A family of hares emerged cautiously, moving with deliberate steps across the mossy ground. Hercules crouched low, adjusting his stance to remain quiet and unobtrusive. He observed their measured motions, the subtle shifts of their weight, and the careful press of paws against the soft earth. He let their quiet rhythm guide his own steps, each movement deliberate and attuned to the natural balance around him. Observation teaches what force cannot, he reflected. As afternoon approached, the grove was bathed in soft, warm light, and shadows stretched long across the mossy floor. Hercules walked slowly along the stream, adjusting small stones, balancing fallen branches, and smoothing the ground with gentle hands. Every motion was purposeful, every step measured, and every breath steady. The grove seemed alive with quiet energy, a companion to his careful movement and reflective attention. He paused at a small pool where the water collected in a smooth depression among stones. He knelt beside it, letting the cool water flow over his palms and wrists, tracing the subtle patterns formed by tiny pebbles beneath the surface. He shifted a few stones to influence the gentle current, observing how even small changes guided the flow of water. Even quiet effort shapes the world, he thought. Even deliberate care carries power. The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers, moss, and distant pine. Hercules leaned on his staff, feeling the rhythm of the grove beneath his feet. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the quiet pulse of life on the earth, and the gentle flow of air over his skin. Strength grows when guided by awareness, he thought. Patience shapes power, and careful attention guides action. A soft rustling drew his gaze upward. A hawk had appeared above the trees, circling gracefully in the sunlight. Hercules observed its deliberate motion, wings gliding with subtle shifts and careful precision. He adjusted his stance, leaning slightly, shifting weight, and letting his awareness guide him. Even the smallest gesture, even the quietest motion, carries consequence, he reflected. As evening approached, the grove grew calm. Shadows deepened, and the silver leaves shimmered faintly in the waning light. Hercules walked steadily along the winding path, staff tapping lightly against the mossy ground, each step deliberate, each motion measured. The quiet lessons of the mountain, valley, hill, forest, and now the grove were carried within him, woven into the rhythm of his body and the steady pulse of his heart. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the connection between mind, body, and the world around him. I carry patience, awareness, and care, he thought. I move with the rhythm of the world, and that rhythm carries me further than force alone ever could. The stars began to appear faintly in the sky, casting soft silver light across the grove. Hercules paused, observing the gentle shimmer on leaves and stones, the quiet murmur of the stream, and the subtle movement of small creatures in the underbrush. He pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the calm flow of breath, and the quiet strength of awareness guiding every step. With deliberate, measured steps, he moved steadily toward the grove's edge, each motion guided by the lessons he had gathered from every journey, every stone, every ripple of water, and every living creature he had observed. The night was calm, filled only with the soft whisper of leaves, the quiet murmur of water, and the gentle hum of life moving silently through the grove. Hercules pressed a hand lightly to his chest, feeling the connection between strength, awareness, and patience. I carry the lessons of the world, he thought. I move with care, and care shapes strength in ways force cannot. Every step, every motion, every breath carries power.